move this. Okay, welcome to this meeting of the Place Overview and Scrutiny panel on the 29th of September 2025. My name is Councillor Gary Reeves and I'll be chairing this meeting. So this meeting is being held in person via Zoom and streamed live to the public on YouTube. I remind all attendees that participation in the meeting indicates consent to the audio and video being streamed live and acknowledgement that after the meeting, it will continue to be available in the public domain. So we're not expecting the fire alarm to sound this evening. However, if it does, please may I ask you to leave in an orderly fashion and rendezvous across the road outside the library next to the fountain. Firstly, it would be useful if all the voting members and officers could introduce themselves so that the public are aware of who is in the meeting and the role they are undertaking. So I'll begin with myself. Obviously, I've introduced myself as the chair of the Place Overview and Scrutiny panel. We have our vice chair.
Introduce her first, then
Vice chair?
Yeah.
Okay. Huh? Oh, Helen's online. Yeah. Okay. Helen, if you could introduce yourself, please, as the vice chair.
Hi, thanks, Chair. I'm Councillor Helen Taylor and I'm Vice Chair for Place Overview and Scrutiny.
Thank you very much. And now we'll go to the other panel members first to introduce themselves and then onto the officers. Councillor Singh, Kashmir Singh.
Councillor Kashmir Singh, substituting for Councillor Carpenter.
Councillor Gurj Singh, I'm a voting member of the panel.
Councillor Shah Martin, member of the panel.
Councillor George Mundell, member of the panel.
Councillor Majid, if you could go next, please. I know you're online.
Councillor Majid, a member of the panel. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And now if we could go to the officers, I'll just start from this way and go forward to Councillor.
I'm Hayley George and I'm the Net Zero Energy Manager.
Heather Minor, Climate Partnership Coordinator.
Good evening, I'm Councillor Adam Burmange. I'm Cabinet Member for Planning, Governance and Asset Management, here to speak this evening on the draft parking supplementary planning document.
Good evening, I'm Ian Motchell, Planning Policy Manager, here to talk about the parking SPD.
Good evening, I'm Lucinda Pinhorn-Smythe. I'm a Senior Planning Policy Officer and I'm also here to speak on the parking SPD.
And if we can go to Andrew Durant next, please.
Thanks, Chair. Good evening, all. Andrew Durant, Executive Director of Place.
And Chris, if you could introduce yourself as well, please.
Good evening, Chris Joyce. I'm the Assistant Director of Placemaking, Partnerships and Sustainability.
Thank you very much, everyone. And so I request that the meeting participants do not speak unless I specifically invite you to do so. Once I have invited you to speak, before you do so, please state your name and the capacity in which you are speaking, if appropriate. Obviously, we've already done introductions, so we can probably forego that part, unless you haven't introduced yourself as of yet. I will also ask officers to speak at appropriate times. So if any individual attempts to disrupt the meeting, I am able to use my powers in the Constitution to adjourn the meeting or have the individual removed. I would also like to remind councillors, panel members, that to improve our time and effectiveness as a committee, I would ask you to please limit the repetition of points or questions which have already been raised by others. Where possible, please put forward all new points or questions which you would like raised during your request to speak. And then we'll now start on the agenda items. Do we have any apologies for absence?
Yes, Chair, received an apology from Councillor Carpenter, and we've got Councillor Kashmir Singh attending tonight as substitute. And we've also received apologies from our two co-optees, Ronnie Latif and Louvain Neen.
Thank you very much. So on to the next part of the agenda, which is our declarations of interest. Do we have any declarations of interest from our panel members? Councillor Singh, Gert Singh?
Yes.
I'll say first name.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not sure if declaration of interest. I have submitted a scoping document with yourself and panel members regarding the Vickers Way car park, and I'm looking to call an extraordinary meeting for that, to have a look into that one. I just want to sort of put down the record. I know it's going to be later on in the agenda, but we're discussing parking as well. So
yeah, I wouldn't count that as a declaration of interest. It's more that will come on the agenda of the work programme. So I appreciate you mentioning it. We will cover that as part of the work programme agenda item.
Thank you. Thank you.
So on to the next agenda item, which is the minutes. So this is to consider and approve the minutes from the meeting held on the 16th of July. And we also have introduced something new as well now, which we talked about at the last meeting, which is an action log. So we now actually have a table of action items that have been gone through by Democratic Services, and we've gone through that to actually update people on that. So I'll cover that in a minute. But however, what I'd like to do is just, can we unanimously vote to sign on and agree on the minutes from the last meeting? Great. Thank you very much. If we can go now to the action table, some of these are actually relevant as well. We do have a couple of outstanding action items from our June meeting. One of the, 4 of those for one of the officers, James Thorpe, and that was to provide some statistics and answer some other questions around the progress of our of the existing climate strategy. Obviously, that's quite important because we're now about to discuss the draft for the next one, and some of these questions still haven't been answered. What we're going to do is, when we get to that agenda item, is actually my decision is to go to officers to find out if there's a timeline by which you would like those questions answered, because that could inform on the discussion. So we will come back to those items later, but I just wanted to mention that they are open action items, and we'll discuss them in a bit. Then we do have an answer for the other action item from June, which is available in the action log and is available also for public as well, visibility. In July, we have just two outstanding action items. One is on the data for presenting as homeless for those evicted under Section 21 notice. So that is to be completed before the next meeting and has been assigned appropriately. And then also there's a agenda item to discuss creating a list for trusted landlords, which again was an item that was brought up in the last meeting, and we'll make sure that that is completed before the next meeting. Okay. The other items on the July one actually were put forward as recommendations to Cabinet. So they were obviously productive action items. So that's the end of the actions table. Just before we move on to the next agenda item. Councillor Gert Singh.
Blundell submitted a scoping document for selective licensing for landlords. That was done, I think it was about a year ago. What happened with that?
Off the top of my head, Councillor Singh, I remember that scoping document, I remember the discussion. I think we discussed it with Amanda, and I can't remember the reason why, but we didn't take it forward. And we did have a discussion, myself, Councillor Blundell and Amanda had a discussion about it, but I'm happy to find that email thread again, just to confirm what happened with that scoping document. But there was a response from the officer on why that wouldn't be taken forward.
Right, okay.
I can send that.
Oh, you can. Thank you very much.
Yeah. And I think what we'll do is we'll note that as an action item as well under the work programme, because that should be within that that agenda item. And we will actually put that on as a specific action item to complete. But I appreciate you bringing it up again. Thank you very much. Okay, so before we go on to the next agenda item, which is the draft environment and climate strategy, there's just a structural change that we've made to the meeting. So after a meeting between the chairs of all three overview and scrutiny panels, we've contemplated about trying to make these efficient and actually focus in on the value of overview and scrutiny. And so in doing so, what we've done is for the main agenda items, we've actually put forward now a new suggested timing framework for it. Within that, it's the chair to give direction on debate and outline why we have it, and that's 2 minutes. Then we have introductory remarks from the cabinet member relative to it, which will be 5 minutes, and then 10 minutes set aside for more technical feedback from the officers. That then gives us more room and more time for the panel members to ask questions, which we have come across previously as an issue. Although it says 30 minutes, I do have obviously the ability to increase that or to stretch that. So we're not going to be right on the money trying to do it exactly by those minutes, but I will try to move things on if we are getting close to that and we are not, we don't have further items to discuss, or we seem to be repeating ourselves around certain items. Then there'll be a time to summarise the debate and also put forward recommendations, so we have time to actually formulate that. That'll be the structure going forward for this meeting and going forward into future meetings as well. Okay, so on that note, we have our next agenda item, which is the draft environment and climate strategy 2026 to 2035. This is the refreshed environment climate strategy, and it's due to be finalised in spring 2026. Once adopted, it will look to cover the next 10 years. So obviously very important that we get it right this time, because it's going to inform for the next 10 years. There's been work on drafting the strategy has begun, and the panel, which is a great thing to see, are actually looking at the first initial draft. This isn't intended to be the only time that we can scrutinise this, but what is great is to see that we're actually being engaged so early in the process, so we can be involved in this, because in the past it hasn't been the case, and we've been brought on almost very late in the process, just before it goes to cabinet, which is obviously not ideal for us as a panel. Okay, so we've asked for provisional recommendations on the content and the direction of the strategy. We did that, and we've discussed that previously. So if we can go on to the introductory remarks from the cabinet member, which I understand, Councillor Werner, you'll be representing the cabinet in this regard. So over to you. Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me to this scrutiny panel for such an important issue as the climate emergency. As a council, we are obviously facing two big emergencies, the financial one that we inherited and the climate emergency. Firstly, it is important to remember that this isn't just a council strategy. It's a strategy that is being developed by the Climate Partnership, working with all the many businesses, charities, schools and community groups. It really is something that we all need to develop together. The council obviously has a leading role, but it only works with everyone involved. And that's really the reason we're bringing it to scrutiny at this point, while it's sort of just being formed, rather than at the end of the process when we present you with a document and say, right, approve it or not. So we really want to get that feedback, both from scrutiny, but also those community groups. If you've not been involved so far in the various community workshops and library roadshows, then please do get involved going forward. So we'll be looking at the feedback from this meeting and making sure that they help define what becomes the final strategy. Then in November, the Climate Partnership are holding a series of engagement events to develop the action plan so that we can turn this strategy into proper actions, turning theory into practice. Then December, we'll start a public consultation which will target businesses, community groups and residents. So a lot of opportunities for everyone to get involved. This needs to be genuinely a community strategy. If you read through the document, and I'm sure you have, you can see the priorities that we're looking at, which are based on both national guidance, but also feedback from community groups and residents. You can also see our vision and ambitions for these priorities. And what are the strategic priorities? Energy, transport, natural environment, waste, and also, as important in the financial position we're in, the governance, finance and risk. So I've often said that with us fixing the mess of the finances, we cannot really advance on anything else. But we also need to fix the mess of the climate emergency. So putting climate considerations at the heart of council decision-making and budgeting is so important. And again, I go back, this is only the first part. It's just a very initial stab. We really need your feedback to make it a fantastic document. And also, it is the vision. Then we need to turn it into a reality using the action plan, which comes next. And again, we'll need all your expertise to make that a reality too. So please, let's have your thoughts. We're in listening mode, so very interested to hear what everybody has to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Practiced on the timing. So now if I could go to our officers, and then if you could go through your presentation as well. Don't know how you're going to do it. I presume you agree to swap between the two. Okay. Heather, if I can leave it with you.
Thank you. So Simon did a fantastic job of introducing the fact that this is brought to ONS early because we're looking for comment on direction and the process that we're involved in. Next slide, please. So the Climate Partnership is an alliance of businesses, charities and community groups working together to achieve a sustainable future for the whole borough. We have representations on the steering group from Royal Holloway University, local social housing association, so ABRI joined us very recently, which is fantastic, local community groups, local businesses, as well as council members. The Climate Partnership was also acknowledged as an area of best practice by the Climate Emergency UK from the 2025 Climate Emergency Scorecards. So as part of this process and drawing up the strategy, they have been attending steering group meetings, attending workshops and commenting on the draft document. And we are looking forward to working with them on the climate action plan as well. Next slide, please. In order to get a baseline for this strategy, we looked at the former strategy. We also looked at the climate impact report, which was made based on the strategy. And we also looked at the climate emergency scorecards. This allowed us to identify gaps, look at what we've done well, and also where we can look for greater ambition as well. Next slide, please. So focusing on the climate impact report, there are highlights. So for example, 18.6% reduction in borough-wide emissions from 2018 to 2022. That puts us in the top 10% nationally. The sustainability SPD was adopted to guide low carbon development and 30,000 trees planted. Schools decarbonisation projects are also school education programme and EV infrastructure rollout. And we've also got community engagement through the Climate Partnership, repair cafes, swap shops, and also the libraries. This report helped us identify what actions worked, but also proved the areas that were challenging and what requires upscaling. Next slide, please. So from the impact with circular economy and waste, we managed to reach 47.1% recycling reuse. We want to have to put that much higher. We want 65%. Energy, we talked about in the impact report, 3 million retrofit in council estate, 200 solar arrays being put up across the borough through the Solar Together scheme. But we also want to follow the Tyndall scale and have 88% emissions reduction by 2035. Natural environment, we've got 26.4% land that's for nature. We've also been working with the delivery of the biodiversity action plan. But we want to go further. We want more nature-based solutions, inclusive access, 30% land for nature, and the delivery of the local nature recovery strategy, which we have been leading on for Berkshire. Transport, we had EVs funding secured and active travel infrastructure increase. And we want to build on this, making sure that our infrastructure is climate resilient and our health outcomes are measured by this, and also the EV infrastructure rollout. And governance, we've obviously introduced the SSPD, and we've also got the work with the Climate Partnership, but we want to build on that as well with a climate risk register, ESG monitoring, finance alignment, and also inclusion of the SSPD into the local borough plan. Next slide, please. So this was the results of the climate emergency scorecards that came out in 2025. We've used this to help gauge our engagement with the community and also our engagement with officers as well. I won't go into too much detail about this, but you can find out more about the climate emergency scorecards online. Next slide, please. How it shaped the strategy. So we're looking at areas that we know that we need to make improvements on based on the scorecards. We've got energy, we need to increase retrofit across all council estate as well as the borough, mandating renewables and low carbon measures in new developments, improving energy literacy and behaviour change, and supporting landlords and private rented sector with decarbonisation. Transport, we've got delivery plans for active transport infrastructure, EV rollout targets and funding plans, and behaviour change campaigns and modal shifts incentives. Natural environment, we've obviously got natural-based solutions in flood risk and urban greening, biodiversity net gain embedded in planning, and expansion of community-led greening and tree planting. So a lot of this is building upon of what we've already done. Waste increases for recycling and reuse, food networks and composting, behaviour change campaigns and infrastructure changes, governance, risk and finance, commitment to develop an action plan with KPIs. So we want to make sure that we have measurables, not just carbon emissions, but other measurables as well. Stronger monitoring, reporting and governance structures, and carbon literacy trainings for officers and members. Next slide, please. So we also looked at best practice from other councils in order to build on this. So the main council strategies that we analysed were Bath and North East Somerset. So the positions that you can see on the slide are out of 153 single tier authorities, having removed the London boroughs because they have the benefit of the TfL. RBWM, so the Royal Borough of Windsor Maidenhead, ranks 37th, but we wanted to look at good practice. So we've looked at Bath and North East Somerset, South Gloucestershire, Wokingham, and we also looked at West Berkshire. It says 40th, but they got the same score as us, and they also made significant improvements to get them up to quite a high rank. Next slide, please. So on this slide, you can see our current draft compared to the other strategies from these other councils to make sure that we are up to scratch with those that have ranked highly. So we are now more in line with the amount of strategic themes that we have. We're ensuring that our community engagement, which has already been pointed out as quite good, remains extensive. Partnership work, and we put the climate partnership on there, but we want to work with so many more partners within the borough. We've also got biodiversity, nature recovery. It's in line with most of them. All of them are looking at BNG, LNRS, and those that aren't mentioned on there is because they haven't updated their strategies just as yet, but all of them will have the LNRS on there. We wanted climate adaptation and health and well-being not to be mentioned, but we wanted it to be embedded throughout, which is why they are golden threads. Waste and circular economy, we've made it a strategic priority because out of the engagement that we found, we kept it a strategic priority because out of the engagement, we found that residents really cared about it and they wanted to make sure that we kept it in. Transport, again, as you can see, it's fairly even across. Energy risk efficiency, again, it's pretty much making sure that we have got good practice in line with everyone else. Carbon literacy, we're looking at obviously not just staff and members, but maybe branching it into communities as well. We also want to have a decent communication plan that goes throughout the whole of the strategy so that we can make sure that it's cross-departmental and really, really well communicated across. And the climate risk register is planned, as you can see, that is in line with the others as well. Next slide, please. So the strategy development, we started with engagement. Now, the reason we wanted to start with engagement was because we wanted local insight, we wanted to know their priorities, and we also wanted to hear ideas from residents across the borough, but not just residents, also community groups, to ensure that the strategy also reflects real community needs and also local knowledge. We know that we did this engagement because we did actually adapt our initial engagement at the request of the Climate Emergency Coalition, who felt the original workshop lacked impact and depth. And in response to that, we redesigned it using the Climate Emergency Scorecards as a foundation to help us generate a more meaningful discussion. Next slide, please. These are all the engagement events that we held throughout the summer of 2025. You can see 2 community workshops, Town Hall, Eco Action Hub. We also had a youth council workshop, which was fantastic. We had the youth council arrange it for us, and over 50 students turned up to let us know what they thought about climate action in their schools. We also had officer engagement, and we had a library roadshow. In about total, we connected with 102 people. Both at the workshop and library roadshows, we managed to engage with residents who also had never had an input on this type of event before, but they really cared about what was happening in their borough regarding climate change. Next slide, please. So the key insights that we have from this: energy, there was a lot of support for what we're already doing, but they want to see it go further, but also a need for energy literacy and cooling strategies. Transport, again, a lot of support for active transport. Active travel, again, community wanted to see it go further, more school streets, and they wanted to know more about what this EV infrastructure rollout actually looks like. But there were also concerns about accessibility, bike theft, and car dependency. Natural environment, they liked the idea of urban greening, tree planting, biodiversity, and flood resilience being tied in with natural solutions. And they wanted to see if there could be more community orchards, and also whether there was more landowner engagement to see what can be done there. Waste, again, it hit resonance with our residents. They wanted better bin infrastructure, composting, recycling incentives, and to know where it all goes. They want to know what happens to it, and they want to know the metrics with it as well. And then there was also this need for food networks and green waste reuse, because there's a lot of food banks out there, but not necessarily a network connecting them all together. Climate adaptation and health and well-being cropped up in all of these. So that's why we've made it a golden thread running through, rather than having them as separate strategic priorities. And then communication, that was really, really vital, because although a lot is being done, it's not necessarily being communicated in the best light. Next slide, please. So we have evolved the strategy. So the differences between this strategy and the last strategy is that the tone and urgency is more. We are not mitigating a climate disaster. We are living in a climate emergency. It's not just about mitigation anymore. It's about how we can help those in the borough. Strategic priorities, it was 4 themes, but now they're priorities, and we've added governance, finance, and risk, as well as included golden threads. Community and partnership engagement. So the initial strategy acknowledged there was a need for it, but now we know it's much deeper than that. We have to work with communities, we have to work with schools, we have to work together in order to really make a difference with climate mitigation in the borough, as well as co-benefits that can benefit everybody. Action planning and delivery. There was a 5-year action plan that came with the first strategy, but it lacked mechanisms and capacity, whereas this one, we're hoping to introduce 2 5-year climate action plans and a communication plans with clear timelines, monitoring, and accountability, which will be our next step. Adaptation and health integration. The first strategy was primarily focused on mitigation, but now we want these things to be throughout, really embedded into the document, and also the actions that follow. And evidence-based and data-driven. So the initial strategy used baseline emissions and national context, whereas this one we're building on local data, the impact report, the climate emergency scorecards, and we're also looking at the option of reviewing it as an external review with academics as well. Next slide, please. So how can we ensure this is a strategy that everyone can have confidence? Well, that's why we're here. We're asking you what we need to do more of. It's evidence-based development. We've been informed by the impact report, climate emergency scorecards. It's built on measurable progress and transparent reporting, and reviewing options for an external expert review. We are inclusive engagement throughout, climate partnership, community workshops, library feedback session, officer engagement day. This ensures that the strategy reflects local priorities in cross-departmental collaboration, but that's just where we've started. We've got more to do. We want more workshops going forward for the climate action plan. Next slide, please. And with that, we want to have a commitment to key performance indicators, monitoring and reporting frameworks, and carbon literacy training for officers and members, And we do want to be ambitious. We do need to achieve net zero. We want to deliver real benefits for residents, and we want to drive systematic change across all services. And then next slide, please. So that's where we are today. Review and incorporate your feedback. Then we will look at climate action plan development. We'll be hosting cross-departmental workshops. We will host community workshops, and we will focus on defined accountability and ownership. Whilst we're looking at that, we'll also be looking at the communication plan. We want to improve internal and external messaging. It needs to be both. Celebrate successes and share progress. Engage residents through cross-departmental campaigns and public consultation. So we'll launch a 6-week consultation, December to January, reviewing options for external expert review, and provide opportunities for residents, businesses, and community groups to provide feedback. That's all.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you going through that for us and then putting the context around around this particular topic. So now we'll open it up for panel members. And so if you'd like to indicate if you'd like to speak, and then we'll come to you in turn. Sorry, excuse me. We have public speakers before we'll go to the panel members. I apologize. Yeah, so if we could ask for David Dean to come forward. Do you want me to tell him he's got 3 minutes? Hi, thanks David for spending the time to come before us and speak. So you'll have 3 minutes from when you start speaking. We'll make your mic live if you can push the button, the grey button on there. One of the grey buttons. Yep, that's good. And then I'll, push again. And then I'll hand over to you.
Okay, good evening. I am speaking tonight on behalf of the Climate Emergency Coalition, a community organisation that represents 14 member groups and around 10,000 residents. The CEC is pleased to see what is arguably one of the most important strategies for our borough being reviewed by an ONS panel. This strategy is proposed to last from April 26 until March 2036, crucial years when urgent action is needed to limit the magnitude of the climate crisis and all that entails. As a member of the public, I am given 3 minutes to speak, but then am unable to engage in the subsequent discussion. I would therefore kindly ask the members of the panel to consider asking the following questions of the responsible councillors and officers here today to help improve the strategy and the resulting action plans. We have previously circulated these questions to you and all of your fellow councillors to aid this debate. What involvement has the Climate Partnership had to date? And how many local organisations have become active members? How many members of the public attended the community workshops and library roadshow? And how will greater visibility of the process be secured? Will the Climate Partnership events to develop the action plan start with the council having identified what the most impactful actions are that are within the council's sphere of influence? Will the consultation in December be about the strategy, the 2 5-year action plans and the communication plan? When will the strategy and plans come back to the ONS for scrutiny? Who will approve the action plans? How far behind are we against the carbon budget set out in the 2020-25 strategy?
That's 1 minute remaining.
What are the emission reductions resulting from the 2025 actions? What stage targets will be set for the ambitions noted under each priority? For example, how many homes in the borough will need to be decarbonised year on year? When will 100% of the councillors and officers have received carbon literacy training? What does most, easy and more really mean? And finally, who will monitor the strategy's delivery? Thank you. I look forward to listening to a constructive meeting.
Thank you very much, David. We really appreciate your time and also the multitude of questions, which we'll try and represent for you here on the panel, amongst others. Okay, and then I believe we have another speaker. So it will be, I think, either Divya or Mike. It's Mike, okay. So Mike, same rules apply to you. You have 3 minutes. If you can, when you're ready, press the silver button and then start speaking. Press it again.
Good, thank you, Chair. I'm Mike Copeland. I'm Chair of Wild Cookham, and I'm representing this evening the other Wild Cookham and the other 5 wildlife groups, the wilds of the Royal Borough. What I want to look at and ask you to look at is how we measure success in this strategy and the honesty with which we use data that is available. And I pick up in particular the point that this is going to be evidence-based and data-driven as a strategy. And I want to choose one particular example to make that point to you. You've seen in the draft presented earlier that, quote, 26.4% of land in the borough is now managed for nature, and we're on track to meet the national 30% target by 2030. That's the quote. This is, I would suggest, disingenuous. The report by the Thames Valley Environmental Records Centre, an organisation used by the borough, which was commissioned by Wild Maidenhead, made clear that of the sites where there is known recent data, just 11.4% of the land in the borough is in, quote, at least satisfactory ecological condition, close quote. A further 11.1% was, quote, being managed for nature either by RBWM or under stewardship. However, of this 11.1%, only 0.6% is council-owned. The rest is part of sustainable farming schemes. Now, these are generally short-term. They may continue, but they don't necessarily do so, with land coming in and out of the schemes and with little long-term commitment to ongoing sustainable management. The report was completed in 2023, so there may have been some improvement or possibly deterioration since then, but a realistic interpretation of the data makes clear that the situation is not as rosy as suggested by the draft strategy statement. You should also note that
1 minute remaining.
Of the 26.4% land claimed, 4% was classified as being unsatisfactory at the moment. We really need to ensure that land isn't simply saved for nature, it needs to be fit for nature. So optimism is great, but distortion is not. Doesn't imply any criticism of the officers who are engaged in this work, with whom we have a great relationship, and as I say, there's no criticism of that, but it's no good to distort the data. The total area under management for nature may well be more than 11.4, but it's certainly not 26.4. So the distance to 30% is a lot higher. So can the panel please ensure that in something of such overriding importance as this, we are completely honest in our use of data and look beyond whatever interpretation best suits the council's case? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your time and the questions and the points you've made. So I think that's it. So now I can open it up to the panel as we have no further public speakers. Councillor Gertch Singh, over to you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yeah, I'm happy to open this up. Yeah, thank you very much for the presentation. Thank you to the speakers. Yeah, this strategy can't come soon enough. We are in an emergency. Lots of good stuff in there. One of the things that sort of my concern is, and it's been picked up within the strategy, is the comms. Comms is below par, and it's been recognised in there. And I think if we can get our comms piece and get ahead of the game on that, we can really make progress. Just a couple of examples. Recently, we've had a campaign with the recycling, and it was very interesting. A couple of people had picked up on it, and they said, "Oh, we weren't aware that you could recycle aerosols in the blue bins and other items in there." So I think the comms piece is really, really important, because unless you're highly engaged in climate and you're aware, you're part of, like a group like the Climate Coalition, it's sometimes, they're the biggest impactors in terms of climate, the people who are not as acutely aware. So that's really good. I'm glad that's been picked up. One thing that I did want to also make, the EV infrastructure as well. That's very, very important. And working with partners, again, it is a sort of a comms piece there as well. I was speaking with officers only just this week, and on the Vickers Way car park again, we've got EV charging points in there, but it hadn't shown up on our partner agencies that there's EV charging points, and one of the residents was going around having a look, and it hadn't picked up anyway. And I think it's a little bit of an own goal. We've got the charging points in there. They should be registered, and they should be flagging up on all partner agencies. So that's just a couple of comments that I've got. The one thing that I do want to ask about and press on is in terms of the strategy, and it was picked up in there about monitoring. And I just want to ask, how would we be monitoring ongoing process and progress, and whether it would be possible to implement within our strategy that there's an annual 12-month review of the strategy. It comes back to scrutiny panel before the committee, and we can have a look and see how we're progressing, and what we're doing well and what we're sort of doing not so well, so we can sort of analyse and scrutinise on that. That's just a question for officers on that one. I don't know whoever wants to pick up on it, Hayley or Heather, it's up to you, or Simon.
So, Councillor Singh, do you want me to go to the officers now, or do you have any more other questions?
Just that to start with, and then let me see if I can think of anything else.
So you just want to know about the frequency of the report back to panel as well. So if I can go to yes, of course. Either Heather or Councillor Werner, if you'd like to go on the comms piece.
Yeah, because that's sort of like policy, so it sort of falls in my kind of brief. Yeah, absolutely, 100%. We've got to get the comms right. We've got to, obviously, as you say, make sure it's accurate, and we can talk afterwards perhaps, or with the officers, about whether that figure is only borough-owned land or whether it's all land in the borough. I think it's probably all land in the borough, and it's probably a snapshot of where we are today. And yes, that can change, that can go backwards, and that can go forwards. Obviously, we're going to work very hard to make it go forwards. But your point about the comms is absolutely essential. We need to get the comms right, both with accurate data, but also using the comms, not so much to say, oh, haven't the council done well, but using it to really get even more involvement from the community, from residents. Every time we get another resident involved in the fight against climate change, it's a little victory. And so what we need is 155,000 victories in Windsor of Maidenhead to get every single resident to be completely involved. So yeah, getting the comms right is absolutely vital. How the monitoring will work, I'll pass over to my colleagues.
Hayley, if we can go to you now.
Thanks very much, Gertstein. So just to address your points you made on the monitoring. Yes, it is incredibly important that we do make sure we hold parties accountable in achieving their targets within the strategy, and how we go about this as well. So you may, just to kind of bring it around to the, I guess maybe the start of the end of the 2020 to 25 strategy. We did bring the climate impact report, which reviews the progress of that strategy, to ONS back in June early this year. So we can absolutely look at bringing a regular annual updates, let's say, on progress to ONS or the most appropriate means. We'll have to go back and have a chat about that and confirm. But going forwards, within these climate action plans, we'll be working with our internal departments and our colleagues, and also you guys, the residents, businesses, whoever else we're working with to achieve these targets in the strategy. on ways to measure that data, hold everyone accountable, make sure it's not something that's going to be really cumbersome for people to have to kind of deal with and log, because we don't want to put people off achieving action. So we want to make it nice and streamlined and make sure we can, at the end of the day, communicate the progress that we're making and therefore the challenges and lessons learned we're making along the way really clearly. So ultimately, to answer your question, yes, absolutely, we can consider those reviews.
Thank you very much. Councillor Kashmir Singh.
Chair, a couple of questions, Councillor Werner and the officers. Having read a lot of the information supplied to myself and other councillors and concerned organisations, I applaud the officers for their report and Councillor Davies. There's quite a few good things in the report. What I'm concerned is the lack of integration of sustainable transport infrastructure at the moment. So people have an alternative to taking their cars into the town, and the lack of parking, especially from outer lying areas and villages into Maidenhead town centre. As far as the targets, we should have been getting to net zero, according to Priestley Centre, by 2028, which seems the target is way, way behind. Could I get some information as far as where we are at the moment with these metrics and where we should be? And these metrics should be measured rather than estimated. So anybody's estimate is just a number they've come up with as opposed to being measured. So we need clear metrics for nature restoration, for example, in hectares restored, as opposed to estimates. That's it for now. If I could come back with any other questions later. Thank you, Chair.
Sure, no problem. So I think there's a lot of policy in there, so if I can hand over to you.
Detail.
Yes,
So I'll do the policy. Yeah, you raise a really important point. Making sure that sustainable transport is integrated and we're providing alternatives to the car. We're all going to want to drive around in our cars, whether they're petrol, diesel or electric, but we also need to look after people that maybe don't drive. So the other forms of transport are equally as important. My father, now sadly deceased, but he became absolutely reliant on the bus in later life. So I am a huge fan of buses. And you might have noticed recently we've improved the bus service in Maidenhead and in Riverside. It now goes every half hour around North Town rather than every hour, which was, although my father's dead, it was something that I said to him 15 years ago, I will get back a half-hourly service, and now it's there. He's just not there to enjoy it. So yeah, making sure that we have good bus services and they integrate with other forms of transport, with buses, with the cars, integrate with the trains, the bikes, integrate with the parking, making sure everything comes together. And I'm sure we could look at the strategy and particularly the action plan to make sure we perhaps firm up on that a bit more and put a little bit more in. Now over to them on monitoring.
Okay, over to you, Hayley.
Thank you very much, Kashmir Singh. So I think the first point that you raised, we may have to just get back to you in writing, just because obviously this is to look at the strategy in terms of where we are at the moment, is the revamp of the new strategy, but obviously that does encapsulate where this new strategy is going. But just to add a bit of context, I suppose, to my answer, we are aware that we are a bit behind. That's not surprising. There's quite a lot of challenges to getting to net zero, and I know that the Tyndall Centre, of whom we do align our trajectory with, they have referenced in their recent review of their own trajectory that things like retrofit, energy efficiency, and also transport are really, really difficult areas to decarbonise, and there's a lot behind those doors, a lot of things that kind of constrain progress, and that goes from government, that goes to policy, that goes to finance, all of these usual things that we're used to talking about. But in this new strategy, we are definitely going to be, we're trying to build a well-rounded strategy. So we target these challenging areas as well as everything else. Basically, we want to bring the borough's baseline upwards, sustainability baseline upwards, and where those challenging areas are, we can give them more focus, and that will kind of come to light when we build those climate action plans as well in the next few months. So hopefully I've added a bit of context around your question, but in the meantime, we can get back to you with a bit more data if that's okay.
Yeah, I'll go back to you and then I'll go to Councillor Blundell after that, if that's okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I want to sort of firm down on the points of scrutiny. How often there's meetings being held to scrutinise where we are on these plans, and when we are not achieving the results that we need to, so rather than perhaps even annually, as Councillor Gurchasing said, maybe twice a year. So where the shortcomings, we can firm up on that, and where we're doing well and so on. RBWM only accounts for 2% of measurables. So we should include really, or have a greater emphasis on other organisations such as pension fund and planning regulations, and bring in residents and perhaps a business community, so we can achieve better opportunities for this. Otherwise, we're not likely to achieve our targets. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Councillor Cashman. Just to cover one thing about the frequency, obviously, I think it was brought up by Councillor Gurchasing as well. So we already covered that part of it. That will actually come down to ourselves as a panel as well on where we feel the frequency should be, and myself. So right now, I don't think a biannual one that's too frequent. I think an annual frequency feels about right for us to be able to actually go back. You need time for these things to take action, right? We need to be able to see them then have an impact. Otherwise, we're doing it too often. And not only that, we have quite an extensive work programme that we have to get through. And I'm just conscious of making sure we've got space for other things. I'm not belittling or trying to play down the importance of this emergency at all. But I do think that an annual review definitely does feel like the right frequency. And we'll be putting that forward as an action item, as one of our suggestions. So I can clarify that for you, if you could. Around the involvement of other areas, I'm not sure if anyone wants to cover that from a policy perspective. I didn't quite understand the question. It was about RBWM only being 2%. So could you clarify what you mean by that? If you want to pick up on that.
I completely agree, and that's really why I'm saying although the council is playing a leading role in this, it's really, really important that as many organisations, businesses get involved in it. If it's just a climate strategy from the council, by the council, affecting only the council, then it's going to completely miss what we need to be doing. Yeah, absolutely. It needs to be completely all-embracing in every community group we can reach, every business we can get involved, every individual resident we can get involved. It can't just be a council strategy, it has to be a community strategy.
Thank you. Actually, can I just pick up on that as well, just to lead in from that? And I know we've kind of had a question from the public speaker that linked directly into this as well. And that's around the climate partnership and the partnership events. I mean, there's a huge involvement, we've been told, from companies and from other areas, and that's going to cover off more of the 98% that we need. And there was a question around that, is how many, what involvement as a climate partnership had to date, how many local organisations have become active members? And I think that talks a lot to what we've just discussed. So can we hear some more about the climate partnership? And in answer to that question, please, some way.
So in terms of active members, it's not how the climate partnership works. It's not necessarily membership, it's who we engage with and who we work with. So we've obviously had engagement with the Maidenhead District Chamber of Commerce in the works of having to work with businesses and how we would like to expand working with businesses. We've worked with individuals such as Gavin Miller, who has a business in the area, and he's tried to help us with our business liaison as well. We want to work with Leisure Focus, one of the big areas that not just as a borough, but nationally, what we can involve sporting communities to get involved with sustainability and just reach thousands more people. So we want to work with Leisure Focus in that way. We've obviously worked with the Youth Council. They've had a huge influence with us. We want to work with local community groups such as Green Skills Library, Eco Action Hub, obviously the CEC as well. We've been expanded into working with churches. So we've got a good relationship with Care of Church in Dedworth and also Dedworth All Saints as well. But we also want to broaden, again, looking at different faith communities and how much involvement they can bring to everyone. We've also had engagement with the Maidenhead Lions, Windsor and Eton Pride, the shop Feeling Good. We've worked with a lot of local schools, and that, again, that was due to the Youth Council and their influence getting us in there, and working with also new partners. Quite recently, we started, we gave some, the Climate Partnership gave some money to the Old Court Windsor CIC in order to have green cinema. So it's engagement with these things, and we're trying to build relationships so that we can work on a climate action plan that everybody wants to be part of, and that there is accountability for everyone.
Thank you very much. In regards to that, have we done an assessment of, or is there a way of trying to quantify what percentage you have now covered, or you're getting input from by engaging with so many different organisations? And because I saw like there was a figure up there of 10,000, like, so have we done that assessment? And is there any area that you believe needs more attention or that hasn't been covered that you would like to incorporate within the climate partnership?
CEC that had the reach of 10,000.
Oh, okay, sorry, I apologise. Sorry.
We haven't, but we are planning to. That is a review that we are conducting. I don't know, it should be something that we would like to do before 2026.
Okay, thank you very much. Particularly because we were told it's going to be data driven and evidenced. Obviously, all of that sounds great, but it would be good to quantify that in some way to see what that in like the CEC have done as well. Thank you. We'll put that down as an action then. If I can go over to Councillor Brundell.
I was taking quite a good look at the transport aspect, and Councillor Mann will be happy to hear that I'm going to be talking about buses again. So specifically about it, it was more looking at the decarbonisation of the bus service. I've seen we've got the new buses that have come through, the purple ones. I'm pretty sure they're still diesel, if I'm correct, still diesel buses. And obviously living here my entire life in the local area, been to Reading enough times and always seen their hydrogen, electric, gas-powered buses. It'd be really great to see if there was ambition for RBWM to look at introducing buses like that. I know we have a commercial agreement with our bus services, but if there was a clear timeline in introducing zero-emission buses, or maybe hybrid buses potentially at least, that'd be really great to see. So it'd be great to see if that's possible. But also looking at some grant schemes as well, taking a little look at the zero-emission bus regional area scheme, which a lot of councils have taken advantage of to get rid of their diesel buses. Again, it'd be great to see if we can explore using something like that. Again, not 100% sure about our commercial agreements, but if there's some interest and see the council going for that, it'd be really great to see.
Councillor Werner?
Yeah, I really agree. As I've already said, I'm a great fan of buses, and it's certainly we can look at whether we can get that into the, well, it might be an action on the action plan rather than a strategy, but I think having more environmentally friendly buses, cars, everything is a good thing. So yeah, we will certainly can take that away and look into it as a possibility, see what grants are available, etc. Thanks for that, appreciated.
Councillor Gertzing.
Chair, yeah, just wanted to make comment. It was from actually the public speaker that raised attention to it about the natural environment and natural habitats. There was two figures that were discussed, whether it's 26.4 and we're below the 30% target, or it's 11.4. I just wanted to ask about that. Because that seems to me like an easy win. I know in the past we've had areas which we've opened up, like Battlemead and Thriftwood Common, Deerswood. And I noticed at a recent planning meeting that I attended, there was a developer. They were building in a borough in the town centre in my ward, declaration of interest. In my ward, the building was happening there, the carbon impact was happening there, yet the BNG was being off-site, off-land, out of borough in Hertfordshire. Can we, when we've got an impact in the borough of construction and development of carbon, can we have the biodiversity net gain, a policy there which urges developers to have that on site or in borough? Because that's where we need to offset it. That's one question. And then the other one, you can answer at the same time if you want. The other one is regards to the low hanging fruit. What big actions, what quick wins can we have? What actions can have the largest impact?
So go to Councillor Werner first.
Yeah. BNG absolutely infuriates me too. I think it's a real problem with the whole BNG setup, that you know the developer has to provide 10% net gain in for development in Maidenhead, and they can invest it in a woodland in Nottinghamshire. We can't stop that as a council. However, if there are ways of making it easier for a developer to keep that money in Maidenhead or Windsor, depending on where the developer is working, then that's certainly something we can't force them to. But if we make it easy, is that a possibility? I think that's really good feedback. Thanks for that, Gert.
And the other one, sorry,
yeah,
fruit. What actions can have the biggest impact?
So I was just going to go to Chris first, if I could, because we've got Chris Joyce online, who's put his hand up. Chris?
I was just going to say that Councillor Singh's point is really important, because there is a hierarchy within the policy around doing it on site first, if not on site in borough, and then out of borough. We absolutely want to make sure that BNG is being delivered in borough. One of the potential benefits of that, and obviously the council's led on the local nature recovery strategy, when a site is identified in the local nature recovery strategy, in effect it generates additional biodiversity net gain credits if it's delivering something within the LNRS. So once that's adopted, that will be another lever that we can use to hopefully encourage more BNG to come in borough, you know, keeping it in borough, and absolutely support that. And that's in our hierarchy, and we'll pick up with planning policy colleagues about how we strengthen that in the new borough local plan as best we can.
Okay, I don't think we've got any further questions from any panel members. There is just a couple of things I wanted to pick up on, if that's okay, before we move on to the next agenda item. I'd just like to give the panel members a go first before, just to pick up on anything that maybe for myself I wanted to hear about a bit more. So we talked about the recycling and waste management side of things, and we have a target which we want to obviously increase to as well to meet. What I was interested in knowing is whether there's a new strategy around the types of recycling that can be done, because I know that that also is a challenge. That's where we can potentially have like an increased recycling percentage. It's the types, like the classifications of recycling, things like when you get a plastic tray, the plastic tray can be recycled, but the seal on top can't be recycled, or plastic bags you have to go and take down to a supermarket to be able to recycle. But I can't see anything around our investigation on greater facility around increasing the potential classifications of recycling we can do in the borough. I just wondered if you could comment on that.
Much comment because it would be for the waste team to comment on, but what I can say is that they have increased their capacity in their team, and I know they're looking to be much more ambitious. So it would be something that they would have to respond to.
And then also it was important about this, the land habitat or the wild habitat. And for me, one of the crucial things around that is the impact of the current house building targets and the impact that we're going to have around building lots and lots of new houses and homes. Now we need them obviously, but we talked about this when we actually scrutinized the 2020-2025, and I brought this up then, and so I'm going to bring it up again because it should be informing our strategy going forward. And that is that we have this expectation, if we take the golf course, for example, that we put in these wildlife corridors, but the expectation is that wildlife are going to follow these corridors, that they're going to walk neatly 2 by 2 along a corridor in between houses. It just doesn't happen. And I think that what is missing from here is to have an appreciation of the loss of land that we're going to have through, for example, the building on the golf course. And have we taken that into account on the basis that we've got to get to 30%? So it seems like we've got to increase the habitat land, but yet we're losing crucial land that is currently inhabited by like deer and by other like animals which need to be protected, and they're just being forced out and being killed on roads just trying to get to their new habitat. And if we don't look at this, and I couldn't see within this strategy where we're looking on improving the movement of habitats and the movement of animals, and that also wasn't answered when I asked it in the 2020 to 2025 discussion scrutiny. So Councillor Werner.
Absolutely, it's one of those things that keeps me awake at night, stops me sleeping. You know, we're given these housing targets by the government. It's they're enforcing them on us, but what effect does that have on the wildlife, the biodiversity of the borough? It's just absolutely tragic and short-sighted of both the current government and the previous government with their targets. We can certainly look at the strategy. I mean, that's the whole point of the session, really, isn't it? It's at its early stages, and we can look at refining it. And so we'll certainly take those comments on board, because there's got to be a way of doing it, despite these absolutely, appalling housing targets we've been given by the government and the effect that's going to have on biodiversity. Yeah, absolutely. But we'll see what we can do to sort of bring that out in the strategy, and then the action plan comes after, if we're able to.
Okay, because it feels counterintuitive, building more, but yet we also are trying to look for more natural environment and natural habitats. Yeah. How do they have this juxtaposition against each other? I just can't see, and we need to be more active and proactive in trying to do that. It doesn't feel like when we build somewhere and we say we're going to have biodiversity net gain somewhere else, how do we move the environment from there to their new home effectively? And it just doesn't feel like there's a plan in place and a strategy to think about how to do that properly. So I'd like to see more in this strategy around that piece and the movement of like habitats.
I think it's both in this strategy, and at the moment we're working under the old borough local plan, which I don't like to start with, but we will be starting to work on a new borough local plan, which hopefully we'll be able to use that as well as this to inform those kind of decisions.
Chris, did you want to come in on this point briefly?
Yes, Chair. I just want to say it's also, you know, the local nature recovery strategy sets that out. So it's about how do we invest in habitat? Where are the right places to invest in that? And obviously that's once adopted, that will inform planning decisions as well. And there are links between the two. So I think there's a bit of work there, but I wonder whether there might be some opportunities to pull out in the strategy examples of where the kind of translocation has happened and some of the things that we do within the team. So there might be some really good best practice examples where, you know, the team has moved species to a new habitat, and I know that's happened in various cases of building things like Braywick, Edgeworth Centre, other examples, and we can bring those to light and start to share a bit more about the work that the team does and kind of promote that. So I think we can pick up that challenge and kind of help to set that out and get that understanding up for the panel and councillors and residents and across the board.
Yeah, I agree. We should have a gold standard for what that looks like, and we should set that out for people and for developers that want to be developers of choice. I think that really is a standard for them. I do have two more questions, but I'll go to Councillor Martin, if I may, before I come back.
Thank you. You just mentioned recycling there, Councillor Reeves. I did bring this up in a previous meeting, that the recycling map, the in-store, where you can drop off batteries and old makeup and stuff, is still not functioning. I've just been on there now and doesn't appear to be working. That's on Edge browser, and that was a recommendation that they would look at that last time. And the other thing I had was on recycling again. I don't know if anyone's been to Book a Dump in High Wycombe, but they have a shop run by a charity right next door to the dump that sells anything that's come out of landfill that's still got a value to it. So I'm just thinking anywhere nearby, Vickers Way maybe. And I'd just like to say the speakers, you brought up some very good questions there. I think some of them we've covered here with the action plans and, you know, having, you know, where we need to know where we are now and where we are to move to. And I think, yeah, regular, you know, strategy meetings on that is probably a great idea. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that's been missed here. I noticed on your slides as well that the rankings between us and each council is up there. If it was split into categories for our benefit, that would be useful as well. So I think that's it for me. Thank you.
And if I pick up on, it was a public question and you brought it up, Councillor Martin, which I think is a good point, is about when will this come back to us? We talked about obviously the yearly review of its, you know, once it's in place. I did note that we were talking in the plan about early 2026, it will finalise and publish the environment and climate emergency strategy, incorporating all feedback. So if it's going to be published, then I think that's the time I think we need to have you back, because I think that's when we can actually see the meat and the bones, when it's actually fully baked out. I think we will have you back then. So hopefully that will answer the public question on when we're going to have you back. That at least for the strategy. And then we've talked about a yearly review on progress as well, which again talked about how this is going to be like scrutinised and obviously be able to have accountability around this as well. I did see, and it was noted that we were 37th, and we were looking at other councils to see where there's best practices that we can adopt, where we can maybe try and grow and move forward to that. I didn't see a target for us to achieve. Are we trying to achieve a higher ranking, and do we know how we're going to get to this higher ranking? Have you set yourself a target that you want to achieve? Do we want to be in the top 20 councils or even higher, hopefully? So on the scorecard, I think, is it we were 37th of all.
Yes, so we haven't got a specific target at the moment, and that's just because, like we said, this is a high-level document with a strategy. We need to, it's also very difficult to determine exactly where we're going to go, what we're going to aim for in terms of scorecards. we need to make sure we're delivering things effectively, rather than just trying to tick box things. And essentially, with the scorecards, there is a risk of a tick boxing exercise. We want to actually deliver stuff that matters to our community, hence why we're trying to, we've used the scorecards to guide and shape this new strategy, but we've also used it as evidence-based. We've also brought it back to what other council strategies are doing. And more importantly, we brought it back down to our community and our businesses and our own colleagues as well. So the scorecards form one part of that. And if there's a way that we can determine where we want to end up in terms of placement in scorecards, then we will do our best to do that. But it could prove a bit tricky. Yeah, it's one of those ones we're learning about kind of every day, every year. They kind of release their expectations. Hopefully that answers your question.
No, that does. I'm just going to ask one more question that led on from that, because it was within the where you were looking and comparing against other boroughs that were doing well, and I noticed that there were a number of them that had rail written on the transport within the transport target. Why don't we have rail listed there? I mean, surely it's an important thing. We have the Elizabeth line that runs to Maidenhead. We have a railway station nearby. We should be really incorporating that into our transport strategy as well. For example, we have things around challenges around people cycling to the train station, you know, putting their bike safely around the train station, parking near the train station effectively. You know, it's all linked to the encouraging more and more rail travel as well. And I just think why is it missing from our strategy document, but it's actually in others?
Yeah. Kashmir raised at the beginning of the meeting, you know, we've got to think of transport as an integrated thing. You know, you need to get the bus or the car to park somewhere so that you can get the train into London or Reading, wherever we need to, or you cycle. We've got to have it as an integrated whole. And I think we said earlier that we'd look into how we can incorporate that into the strategy or the action plan. Yeah, quite right.
So we will see rail in some way incorporated into
We'll
that.
see if we can
We will
incorporate
mention it then.
Okay. And then we'll be bringing the strategy back to the scrutiny panel.
Okay.
So you can mark us.
Thank you. Okay, I think we had Councillor Kashmir Singh.
Thank you, Chair. The point that you raised about the train station parking, that just reminded me, it's been 2 years. I've risen to Southwest Trains and I still haven't had a proper response from them because there is no parking there for residents or for disabled people who can actually get to the train station. And that is national legislation which they have to provide it so they can actually access these facilities. It's too far. They have 6 parking spaces, which are always taken for the disabled, and the other 6 parking spaces are for which are available, but they're taken by the staff, and there's a couple for taxi drivers. So to integrate that, we've got bus service there. If you can't park or pick anyone up, it doesn't help. All they've done is put cameras there 2 years ago in February so that they can give you a ticket. So we need to integrate this. Very briefly, what education is being provided for the officers and residents so we can bring them along with us to achieve a better outcome, and also for the councillors? And if it hasn't, we should integrate the climate into our council governance and decision-making. So if you can fill us on that, where we are. And the last point is the SLT and the senior members of the ruling Lib Dem group must take seriously and include this at a high-level corporate plan in all decision-making. And we will do our best endeavours as councillors to support the council going forward. Thank you.
I suppose this is all based around policy, so Councillor Werner.
Thank you, Kashmir. We seem to be agreeing a lot tonight. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was one of the main people that argued against the scheme outside Maidenhead Railway Station. I think it's absolute huge waste of money by the previous administration. It was really shocking. Took away loads of parking, took away loads of drop-off points. It was really doing everything it could to stop people wanting to use the railway station. Now, fortunately, our amazing MP Josh Reynolds is on this. And it's because any changes of the scheme would need their support and to be honest, Kashmir, their money, because obviously the Conservatives left us practically broke as a council. So yeah, Josh is currently talking to the railway authorities to see what can be done to improve the situation there, because it really is shocking. You're absolutely right, and it's completely unaffordable for us to fix ourselves. And in any case, it will be up to the railway company to approve anything. On your other points, yeah, absolutely. Governance, and I think that's covered very nicely in the strategy, because we've got to get the governance right. You're completely correct on that, and I think that's covered. But we can look at the exact wording. There was a third point. Oh yeah, that's Wisdom's point he likes to make, isn't it? Yeah, absolutely. It's at the moment one of the main aims in the council plan includes making the council greener, so it's all incorporated in that. As we come to the refresh of the council plan in the build up to February, March, I think it is, then we're going to be developing, refreshing the action plan that goes behind the council plan, and we'll be continuing to add to that. But I think a lot of the council plan will refer to this document, so it'll be saying we're going to deliver the climate strategy as part of the council plan. That's why getting this right and then making sure it's referred to in the council plan is the way that governance would work. But yeah, really important. The other point you raised was about education of members and officers and councillors. I'll pass that over to my colleagues. What have we got planned?
I can take that one. We've got carbon literacy training. We're actually doing a big carbon literacy training on the 15th of October. And we will continue to deliver carbon literacy to as many officers, and we'll obviously try and look for a target and how we can stage that. But we also want to deliver carbon literacy to all members as well.
Okay, looking at time, obviously I love the discussion. It's great. Councillor Beaumage, if obviously you want to speak on this point, and then if we can make that brief, and then we have Councillor Blundell and also Councillor Taylor, and then we're going to wrap it up there. Councillor Beaumage.
Yeah, but it's just a governance point. So we, for the first time, we've introduced the climate and environment strategy as part of the formal policy framework of the council. So it will be adopted formally by full council and will carry the full weight as a planning framework, as a policy framework document. So it will have equal weight like the council plan and other strategies. That's not the case at the moment. We've changed the constitution to make sure it is given the weight it's supposed to have.
Okay, Councillor Blundell, over to you, and then we'll go to Councillor Taylor after that.
I just wanted to make a point about the EV charging aspect of transport as well. Just thinking about it now, obviously we've had EVs now in this country for a good while. We probably all know someone who's got one, who's at least driving a hybrid, but I actually know people who have bought an electric car in the last 3 years who've now switched over either to a hybrid or a plug-in hybrid because they don't find that the EV charging infrastructure is there. I know obviously as a council, we discussed it in the panel, we've got the new grant for obviously a lot more EV charging, and it'd be really great for a lot of people's anxiety with making the switch for maybe the council communications department to make it really clear for residents where either new EV charging points are going to be or where they are already sort of obviously based on the point from Gertch about the Vickers Way EV charging points. I don't know if that would be possible, but it sounds like it would be, and it would be really great for residents just to have a clear outline of where they can put their cars and then go shopping and come back to it fully charged.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Councillor Blundell. Particularly because people have to think ahead. You know, they're making a huge investment in these vehicles. You know, that's sometimes, you know, 3-year commitments if they go onto a lease agreement. So I think it's very important that they can see ahead when that might be possible for them to either switch or that it's going to be supported. So the forward plan being shared would be good within our strategy. Councillor Werner, did you want to come back about that?
Answer brief in the looking at time. Yes.
Thank you, Councillor Werner. Okay. I think that's a good point, and we'll take that on as an action item. Councillor Taylor, if we can go to you now.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Brilliant, thank you. Just really quickly want to bang on my favourite drum about social housing. Can we make sure that we are engaging with all the housing associations in the area? I know Housing Solutions are doing a lot of work on climate and what they can do to help residents, and they're obviously at a point where they're most of the housing associations are having to start thinking about retrofitting to up the EPC rating of their housing stock. So now would be a really good time to engage with them to make sure that they're, you know, on the same page and they're coming in at a time where they can make changes and advise residents.
If we can go to you, Heather, because I think that's really around the partnership piece.
Currently have ABRI, who is one of our social housing companies on board of the steering group, and we will also be reaching out to Housing Solutions at this time as well to get them on board as well. So definitely.
So thank you very much. Really appreciate everyone's engagement in this. Such an important and critical topic as well. We all know really the climate emergency is happening now, even though other people don't tend to think so. We need to do something about it, and we need to have a really clear, robust plan. This 10-year one is the most important plan I think that we have to develop right now in regard to that. So I appreciate you spending the time to come here and to actually go through and present it at such an early stage. Looking at the importance of it, it's really good to see that you've involved so many of community workshops and other engagements. There were 1 or 2 questions that we had that were given to us by the public speaker, such as how many attended, etc. We're going to take those away and we'll share them with you. We'll actually publish the feedback on those answers for you. It'll be in the public domain. So, but rather than spending more time here trying to go through more numbers, we'll actually publish that for you as part of the minutes, and we've taken that as an action item already. Other actions are that we will be requesting for the insertion of the strategy that there is a yearly report back to Scrutiny panel on the progress of this. It's very important. Obviously, you can't just sit around waiting, you know, it's 10 years, but we need to see progress every year that you're reaching out towards that target. The recommendation is that when you come to present back to us, that we can see the delta against you achieving that, whether you're, you know, and can have some sort of traffic license or however you want to present it, but we'd want to be able to see that progress. So that would be a yearly one. Also, another action item is that we will have you back at the beginning of 2026 with the complete strategy. So we will have you back then. Also about forward communication of EV locations. That was another action item as well that we've noted. Inclusion of rail within your within it as well. I think that's really important. And then an assessment on also inclusion of around the natural environment and the movement of it, and how we're going to actually achieve that with all the house building as well. That was another thing that we talked about that we'd like you to look into and form part of the strategy that was around there. And then also, I think there was another thing we were talking about, which was around the recycling as well, and waste. And I know that Councillor Martin brought up about we have an outstanding item as well from that. We also have some outstanding items from our meeting from June, which if they're currently assigned to James Thorpe, if you could please reach out internally and actually get that feedback from him as well. I know we've put in our action items that we want it before the next meeting, but you may need it before that. And I think should inform on your strategy as well. Is there other ones that you've noted as well?
Just put that in the minutes. It's very clear.
Yeah, okay. And then also, you were going to do an assessment on the actual impact of the other 98%, like how we were going to achieve that as part of the partnership as well. So, you know, what your reach is now, quantify that for us. I think that's a fair assessment of where we got to and a lot of the suggestions, but you know, I'm sure you've taken away some more. We'll summarize that in a minute. So thank you very much for your participation in the meeting. Thank you. Okay. You can stay if you like, or you can go. I mean, we are talking about parking, so it might be. I mean, parking also has an impact on the environment, so. All right. Thank you very much. And thank you to the public speakers as well for coming down here and speaking. Okay, so that's the end of that agenda item. And now we're going to move on to the next agenda item, which is our parking SPD. So this is going to be considered before Cabinet on tomorrow, with the recommendation asking for the approval of publication of the draft SPD to allow for public consultation. So there will be a public consultation after this as well. And the draft SPD will provide more detailed advice, guidance on the implementation of the local plan. We all know that obviously SPDs are really important in informing on development around the borough, and they need to be taken into account and given the appropriate weight when considering both the borough local plan and also under NPPF. And it forms part of our overall planning strategy. So if I can now hand over to Councillor Bamaj, so if you can introduce it first of all.
Yes, good evening, everyone. Yeah, good evening, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much for inviting me to speak this evening about the consultation draft of the parking supplementary planning document. I believe that this will become a vital tool in helping to shape smarter, more sustainable planning decisions across our borough. It will serve as a guide for meeting the policy requirements of the borough local plan with respect to provision of off-street parking in all new developments, both residential and non-residential. The journey to get to this stage has already seen early engagement with this panel and with the public. And if I'm honest, getting to this point has not been without its challenges. These are not straightforward documents to formulate. Trying to find standards that take account of significant differences in the level of accessibility in different parts of the borough, and finding the right balance in parking standards for different sizes of property that meet the needs of various, sometimes competing policy aims. Maybe therefore it's not surprising that nobody has tried to update the parking standards in over 20 years. However, I'm now happy that this draft is ready for formal public consultation. I believe that it does succeed in setting out a clear evidence-based framework for determining parking the right level of parking in new developments. In that sense, it's not just a list of numbers, but a strategic guide that balances accessibility, sustainability, and the real-world needs of residents, businesses, and visitors. I'm really grateful for the hard work and responsiveness of the planning policy team in getting to this point. So what does this document cover? Firstly, it outlines parking standards for residential, commercial, and also mixed-use developments. It considers quantitative evidence such as public transport accessibility, car ownership levels, and local character. It includes guidance on disabled parking, EV charging points, cycle parking, and car club spaces. And why is this going to be important in future planning decisions? Well, first of all, it will offer consistency and clarity, so developers and planners will now have a transparent benchmark It reduces ambiguity whilst providing a reasonable basis for flexibility. Working with a 21-year-old parking standards based on completely out-of-date assumptions is far from optimal, and sadly that's the case what we are having to work with today. It's also going to be really important for sustainability. So it's going to align parking provision with public transport access and encourage active travel, reduce car dependency and promote greener lifestyles whilst ensuring that existing streets and the residents that live in them are not adversely impacted by parking overspill. It's also important to note that this is about future-proofing. So provisions for electric vehicles and shared mobility, this SPD will support a transition to low-carbon transport future. So just to conclude, I want to just point out the sort of bigger picture here. So parking really is not just about where we leave our cars, it's about how we design places that work for people. This development, or this document, helps us ensure that new developments are not only functional, but also inclusive, environmentally responsible, and aligns with our long-term vision. In conclusion, this parking SPD is more than a technical guidance. It's a planning tool that will empower us to make better decisions, ones that reflect our priorities and meet our needs and the needs of residents and prepare us for the future. This is certainly not the end of the journey, and I very much look forward to hearing from and responding to the panel members this evening, and perhaps more importantly, no offence, the public in the formal public consultation.
Thank you, Councillor Bamarge. So now if we can go on to our officer, please. So over to you.
Thank you, Councillor Bamange, for the introduction. So I will, along with my colleague Lucinda, will be just presenting a few slides now to explain a little bit more about the draft document. So if we move to next slide, thanks. So this draft parking SPD supports the council plan and the council's strategic vision and sustainable travel goals, whilst ensuring appropriate levels of parking are maintained. It aligns with the local plan policies and national guidance, and aims to ensure that parking provision in new developments is appropriate, well designed, and creates improved urban quality. And it will promote that modal shift to sustainable travel, of course, where it is available, and responds to local evidence and variations within urban areas and rural areas, but it would be a material consideration in planning decisions and guide applicants, developers, and planning officers when assessing proposals. That's its purpose. We can move on to the next one. So, in terms of why do we need a SPD? So, I think as Councillor Berman said, the last parking strategy and the standards within it are 21 years old, no longer aligned with national policies or local policies, and doesn't reflect the council's goals of promoting sustainable travel and addressing climate change. So we've got evidence from the 2021 census and other sources showing significant variations in car ownership across the borough, influenced by factors such as housing type, location, and accessibility. And clearly urban areas such as Maidenhead have lower car ownership and better access to public transport, whilst rural areas show, not too surprisingly, higher dependency on private vehicles. So the SPD addresses these disparities by introducing a zonal approach to parking standards, ensuring that provision is tailored to local conditions. This approach supports sufficient land use and lines with, as I say, broader planning objectives. And we're moving away from rigid maximum or minimum standards, instead offering flexible guidance based on robust evidence and local context. So having a parking SPD will put us in a better, stronger position than not having an SPD. It'll have more weight than the 2004 parking strategy, more likely to be supported, a planning appeal, and it's supported by up-to-date and robust evidence. So if I can move to the next slide, please. So in terms of the engagement so far, I won't say too much about this. We've already heard, I think, that it's been developed through scoping exercise involving councillors, officers, public engagement, and this has helped to shape the draft SPD to ensure it reflects local needs and priorities, and where the evidence to support the guidance is drawn from. And some of the key themes from feedback are shown on the screen there. I won't run through them all exactly, but you'll get a flavour for the support for zoning, concern about insufficient parking in new developments, an emphasis on the need for visitor and disabled parking spaces and EV charging, and concerns about overspill and inadequate parking on streets and pavements. So I'm now going to hand over to Lucinda, who is going to say a bit more about the SPD.
The SPD emphasises flexibility in applying parking standards. While the guidance provides recommended levels of provision, developers can submit parking assessments to justify deviations based on local circumstances. This ensures that parking restrictions do not lead to undesirable outcomes, such as excessive on-street parking or suppressed development. The SPD does make it clear that higher levels of parking will be supported where this meets a site-specific need, and it would still make effective use of land and provide policy-compliant levels of affordable housing. The SPD outlines requirements for parking surveys, including methodology and timing, to support evidence-based decision-making. Once adopted, the SPD will be a material consideration in planning applications, guiding developers, officers, and development management committees in assessing proposals. It is important to note that if a made neighbourhood plan includes its own parking standards, those parking standards will apply in the relevant area rather than the standards included in this SPD. This flexible, evidence-led approach ensures that parking provision supports sustainable growth and aligns with the borough's planning and environmental goals. The SPD is underpinned by a comprehensive evidence base compiled in a separate document labelled Appendix D. This evidence base includes data from the 2021 Census, Office for National Statistics, the recently published Department for Transport Connectivity Tool, the Berkshire Observatory, and local housing and transport datasets. The connectivity tool combines transport and land use data to generate a connectivity score out of 100 for all places in England and Wales. Key findings reveal that car ownership increases with distance from urban centres and decreases with improved access to public transport and active travel infrastructure. For example, Zone 1, which has been identified as a high accessibility area, has 88% of households owning 0 to 1 car, while Zone 3, a low accessibility area, has 65% owning 3 or more cars. There is a strong correlation between dwelling size and car ownership, with larger homes typically having more vehicles. The evidence also shows that areas with better cycling and walking infrastructure have lower car dependency. These insights justify a zonal approach adopted in the parking SPD, which divides the borough into 4 residential zones and 2 non-residential zones based on accessibility and connectivity. This ensures parking standards are proportionate, sustainable, and responsive to local conditions. Sorry, I lost my mouse. 4 residential zones have been developed from an analysis of the evidence base. Zone 1, town centres, high accessibility. Zone 2A, inner suburbs, medium to high accessibility. Zone 2B, outer suburbs, medium accessibility. And Zone 3, rural areas, low accessibility. Areas with a score from the connectivity tool of over 70 outside of town centres are classed as 2A, and areas with a score of 60 to 69 are classed as 2B. Areas lower than 60 are zones 3. Non-residential standards are simplified into Zone 1, high accessibility, and Zone 2, medium and low accessibility. Zoning ensures parking standards reflect local conditions and is proportionate to the needs of each area. The SPD also allows flexibility in applying these zones, enabling planning officers to consider local circumstances. Detailed inset maps in Appendix 6 illustrate the spatial extent of each zone, aiding the application of standards. Sorry, next slide, thanks. The SPD sets out parking standards for both residential and non-residential developments, structured by zone and dwelling or use type. Residential standards vary by zone and number of bedrooms, with lower requirements in high accessibility areas. Cycle parking standards are also included, with 1 to 4 spaces per home depending on size. Disabled parking should constitute 5% of unallocated provision. Non-residential standards are tailored by use class and zone, with specific ratios for car and cycle parking. Some uses, such as care homes, would be dealt with on a site-by-site basis, as this depends on the needs and impacts of the specific care home. Car clubs are encouraged for large developments of 80+ units to reduce car dependency. The SPD moves away from old rigid maximum or minimum standards, instead offering flexible guidance based on evidence. This adequate parking with goals of sustainable travel and efficient land use. I'll now pass back to Ian.
Thank you. So in terms of next feedback from councillors, residents and stakeholders has been incorporated into the draft SPD. So the next step, that is provided that Cabinet tomorrow approve the report, would be formal public consultation required under the Town and Country Planning Regulations. This consultation would last for 6 weeks. That's 2 weeks longer than the statutory minimum, and then would take place during October and November this year. And at the end of the public consultation period, representations would be carefully reviewed and considered, and appropriate changes made to the draft SPD. And then the final version would be presented back to Cabinet with a recommendation for adoption. And that is expected to be in spring 2026. And once it's adopted, the supplementary planning document would have full weight and guide parking provision in new developments and support the borough's objectives. So that was all we were going to say, and we would be happy to take any questions at this point.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that presentation. So I don't think we have any public speakers on this matter, so we'll open it up to the panel members for questions. Councillor Martin, over to you.
I've just got a quick question. Obviously, we're moving to a zoning model, which makes sense because it's looking at impact. However, obviously the previous one was from 2004, the previous SPD. I'm just thinking, in that amount of time, are we going to be reevaluating areas that are zoned? So for example, if an area that's currently sort of like medium urban sort of area on the green shaded area, and that becomes more developed over time and has more impact, you know, is that going to be looked at in more regularly than 20 years? So, thank you.
Councillor Martin, obviously it's not ideal that it's taken 20 years to get to the point of having revised standards, and we'd certainly hope that it wouldn't take another 20 years before these standards were revised again. And you know, there is an option, of course, that any standards that are adopted could be incorporated into the next local plan potentially to give them even more weight. And yes, obviously the current SPD that we're producing now is based on up-to-date evidence, and so we are confident that it's robust at its current point.
I was thinking that, you know, if there's a zone, say, I don't know, Hurley suddenly changed, you know, then, you know, would that be updated, like the actual zones that are listed in the document? Is that something that can be reviewed on its own more regularly, perhaps?
Yeah, there is an option to review that. I think, as we showed in the presentation, a lot of this is evidence-based and based around this connectivity tool, which only came out maybe 2 or 3 months ago. So I fully expect that, you know, over time that data set will evolve and scoring of those little pixels will change as we move along. So we'll keep that, you know, certainly keep it under review, and where it becomes apparent that the zones as, you know, hopefully adopted at a particular point in time are no longer fit for purpose, we certainly can review that, whether that is through going through an SPD process, or having something within the next local plan which maybe provides some level of ability to make those amendments. We'll have to see, but yeah, certainly the point is that it needs to be up to date and responding to changes on the ground.
Thank you very much. If I can go to Councillor Taylor next, please.
No, thank you, Chair. I'm quite glad this is coming forward, because we've had issues with, I mean, I'm sure parking is the bane of most of our lives at the moment. And we've been in situations where, you know, developments have come to planning and they've had too much parking, would you believe? And it's been thrown out because of that. And then we've got other developments that come through with no parking. I would just like to mention that, you know, how much thought are we giving to two things which concern me when it comes to parking and putting in a new SPD that's going to go into planning, is when we're giving car park management plans that never materialise and don't get enforced. And I noticed that visitor spaces have been mentioned in the SPD. You know, can we put something in there so that developers are clearly marking visitor places? Because there's been numerous developments spring up in Maidenhead which have had visitor parking on a map somewhere when it was first done, but when you actually drive onto the estate, you don't know where these visitor parking places are. People are parking anywhere, people are taking up other people's spaces. So I just want to put that out there so that we're trying to cover as many bases as we can, really. Thank you.
Ian, if I can come to you.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. We can obviously take that away, that thought about the visitor parking spaces, and maybe adding a sentence to clarify that this should be clearly marked. Clearly, yeah, we can't. It's not going to go. It won't be able to go into as much detail as a planning application would, but we could perhaps add a sentence on that. Car parking management plans. I'm not. Presumably, is this to do with you know, planning applications and the schemes that are coming forward? Because again, I'm not sure that there's a great deal in the current draft on that.
No, I guess this is something you sometimes is secured by a planning condition, isn't it? That you have, a parking management or car park management plan needs to be provided. I guess from a planning point of, or the strictly planning point of view, what happens is that condition is discharged at the point where an acceptable car park management plan is put forward. But then in terms of sort of how we're able to then regulate or monitor and potentially enforce non-adherence with that management plan, that then it becomes more difficult because once the condition's been discharged, it basically comes out of the control of planning. In some cases, some cases it may become a highways issue, especially where failure to properly adhere to plans causes unacceptable overspill onto other roads, and also, of course, if a larger development ends up having streets which are adopted, they then become the responsibility for the highways authority, and will be able to fully enforce that as highways authority when if there are particular obstruction or other issues occurring. But it is a difficult one. I do see issues in many locations throughout the borough where I think perhaps these things are not being adhered to as promised.
Yeah, the issue is, from my point of two particular developments, is where the roads are unadopted, so they're private land. The car parking's not been done right, and then they kind of fall into a black hole where the management companies or the owners aren't willing to do anything, and we as a council highways can't do anything because the roads aren't adopted. Is that something, I know I'm deviating slightly, Adam, that we're starting to look at? Because unadopted roads are not ideal, because then the residents are falling into a black hole and nobody can enforce anything. Is that something that's being looked at, with this, or could be looked at with this, to see where we're going so we have less unadopted roads?
It can be looked at. I wonder if perhaps it might be outside the scope of this, of what this SPD's objectives are. But having said that, we can look at that, and potentially, just thinking off the top of my head, if there are potentially ways of securing management through developer obligations, Section 106 legal agreements, rather than relying on sort of goodwill after the condition has been met, then we can look at whether we have. We can certainly ask colleagues and officers to look at whether that's a possibility, and whether we can kind of whether there's actually some policies within the existing BLP or potentially a future local plan which could make that a relevant planning obligation.
Thank you very much. If I could go to Councillor Majid next. Over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one question about non-residential development, especially schools. And all council, I think I've had complaints from agents where parents are parked in front of their drives or on their parking spaces, or even disabled spot on the payments. Is that should this not be covered within this document as well? I mean, I know you've got the zones as well, but we've also got schools. And even though the pupils are supposed to live within a few hundred meters of the school, we still get a lot of car parking issues around schools. So is this going to be addressed as well? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
If I can go to, I don't know if that's more detail, Ian, or are you going to defer to Councillor Ramos? If you can answer that, please, Ian.
Parking standards for educational uses within the document, and I won't read all those out, but you can see it on page 23 of the draft document, and it does cover both spaces for teaching staff plus other staff, and also spaces for pupils as well. So it's in the document.
Could I just get an additional bit of clarification on that, Ian? Because I noticed it was in there. So when it's talking about the car parking standards for high accessibility zone and medium low, that's talking about the location of the actual school, right? And then the provision of parking standards.
Planning proposals for educational uses, and it would be the parking to support that planning application, rather than, for example, existing schools.
And so, because I looked at this, and obviously in the high accessibility zone, which is, I would obviously fall, I didn't see the map, but we're within like more urban areas for schools. Then it says, it talks about 1 space per 2 FTE teaching staff plus 1 per 2 FTE other staff. And then 1 space per 60 pupils, including a drop-off. What we tend to find is that what we're saying there is that the staff will generally come from within a walkable or active transport scenario. Is that's correct assumption? But what we find is actually, a lot of staff, it's quite hard to get teachers to be able to live in particularly urban areas because it's very expensive, particularly if you think about the centre of Maidenhead, how expensive the apartments are, how expensive living, those are. And we can't, I think, just think that they're going to be able to all walk to there and to be able to access it because of the price of property for people that are on a teaching salary, for example. So I wondered how that was considered when coming up with this figure and where the data comes from in around that, please.
All of these non-residential parking standards have been derived from various sources, including best practice elsewhere, and of course our knowledge of local conditions. But I mean, clearly there would. I completely understand the point. However, at the same time, yeah, we do have to recognise that there is better public transport accessibility within, the high accessibility zone, better public transport access, and these are flexible. These standards would be applied flexibly. So at the planning application stage, if robust evidence was put forward why these standards should be changed, to, for example, to provide more parking for staff, then that would be considered at the planning stage.
Which I noticed that I did write about flexibility, and that's one of the key words that we've heard is flexibility. But it's strange to think that flexibility is open to interpretation. Obviously, there's a subjective nature to how it's then going to be applied. How are we then seeing that we can achieve the clarity? We've been told that this is to give clarity to developers, clarity to panel members on how to apply this. And what we've seen in the past is that with SPDs, if it's left open to interpretation, that it's very difficult then for panel members to come to a conclusion that's based on this type of approach. So, I mean, what I was questioning is whether this is striking the right balance between flexibility and being exacting. Yeah. Like, how flexible really is it? Is because you say it's flexible, but then you say it's obviously has to be taken into account.
No, it's a really good point, and this was one of the major items of discussion in in developing this document. I think an important sort of paragraph to look at is 2.13, and that contains the general principles that apply to the SSPD. So this actually goes into more detail of what we'd expect a developer to demonstrate should they wish to vary from the standard. So that's the idea. I know, as you say, at the moment the flexibility becomes subjective quite often, and I know that the highways consultants do a really good job and at looking at each application, but there is room room for interpretation, whereas this is actually, it sort of spells out within the principles what a developer would have to demonstrate and the kind of evidence that they'd need to provide in order to show that a, either lower or potentially higher provision of parking would be acceptable and not cause any and wouldn't cause planning harm. So I think that I think it strikes that right balance of not being so rigid, that we end up asking developers to do things which are in certain contexts unreasonable, but at the same time making sure that the evidence has to be robust if they want to deviate. On that sort of wider the point about schools, and I just sort of say, we'd expect a development like that part of the requirement is something that comes from national regulations, but also our sustainability SPD would be that the applicant would have to submit a travel plan, which would detail different measures and things that they expect to do to encourage a move towards, or modal shift towards, more sustainable ways of transport. Partly, in order to achieve that, it may even well be that the developer needs to make a contribution through a 106 agreement to certain infrastructure, be it bus infrastructure, for example. So I think it's important, in a way that we have that that we get this parking SPD right, so that we're able to then secure, also sort of indirectly secure those developer contributions to making improvements to sustainable transport.
I appreciate that, and I did notice about, obviously there's a lot of weight given also around cycle parking as well within the SPD, and did note that specifically, and that leads me on to one question I did have was around, so when you come out of more urban environments and you're talking about residential requirements for cycle parking, how is that actually achieved? Do people have to have, like some form of, if it says like 2 or 3 cycle spaces, how is that then resolved for a residential developer in the kind of more suburban type of zone? So zones like 3, for example, how do we actually then, what's the expectation? And I couldn't see how do they have to have a cycle rack? Is it evidence? Is it because they've got room in their garage? Can you just explain how that's achieved?
Not sure I have an exact answer to that, but clearly cycle parking, as it's set out at the moment, is based on the size of the dwelling, not rather than necessarily the location, but clearly the way cycles will be used would be influenced by the accessibility. So I'm just being handed a reminder that in paragraph 5.6, it does say, for example, a bit about how cycle storage. It states the council's the borough-wide design guide 2020 includes guidance on cycle storage, including stating that all new development will be provided with on-plot space for bin and cycle storage in accordance with cycle parking standards. So there is more guidance in other documents that would also guide cycle parking, and clearly, yes, I don't know if Councillor Bermange wants to add something.
Well, just that, the provision of sufficient cycle spaces would be secured by condition. So there would be there'd need to be a cycle parking plan, submitted as a condition, and that already happens. This is just it would have to be sufficient and follow that design guidance as well. It couldn't just be necessarily just be a shed and you say, oh, that's your cycle provision. It has to be slightly more robust than that.
Councillor Kashmir.
Thank you, Chair. Very briefly, development we're having at the old Lace Centre, Magnet Lace Centre, they're giving a £500 subsidy for parking at Hines Meadow for are flats which only have one bedroom because they have no allocated parking space, only for parking space for 2 bedrooms. So when a developer first states that they're going to provide parking spaces, what for 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, and so on, I'll come later on in this to a specific issue in my ward. What can the council do? So this will be for either or both Ian and Councillor Beaumont. The specific issue is the development of Deerswood at the old Bagnall Pit on Blackamoor Lane. Now, that's not a private road. There's 400 homes there, probably about 120 odd houses. The rest are just flats. There is insufficient parking there. There is hardly any visitor parking. And if you park in a visitor parking, you'll get a parking ticket. What is the council doing for that? If councillors have to go and see their ward residents, they can't park anywhere. So there's an overspill onto all the other roads which are very congested already. There's single and double yellow lines. So when developers deviate from what they promise, what can the council or the planning officers do afterwards? Thank you.
An enforcement issue, if, for example, on a particular scheme, a condition wasn't being complied with, then that clearly becomes an enforcement issue. And that's really, again, I think it's outside the scope of this particular SPD, which can only set parking standards for new development rather than necessarily enforce them. But clearly, if there is a particular issue with an area, such as the one you've described, and I don't know that particular situation particularly well, but then clearly that might be a local circumstance that means that there, again, might be some flexibility in the standards if there was an existing problem in an area. But yeah, this can't really deal with issues around compliance with a condition, for example.
The conditions were there. While construction is in progress, are the officers and not looking to make sure that they're done? There's other issues which are outside the scope. There was things such as air and ground source heat pumps. They've never worked from day one.
Sorry, Councillor Singh, can we keep it to the parking?
Yeah.
We're talking about
What
parking.
I'm trying to say is
I don't want to use up
enforcement.
time talking about other things.
There is no enforcement. What can we do for enforcement when developers deviate from what they promise after the fact? Is there anything the council can do, or we just have to accept it?
Well, this is where planning conditions are taken into account. So if there's planning conditions, then there are enforcement opportunities to enforce against that. That would come to the enforcement department rather than an SPD is informing on the planning conditions that you will eventually arrive at or that developers will have to abide by. So if we think about this is a framework of how we get to those conditions rather than enforcing them.
Fantastic.
So if I could, I just wanted to keep us on track with what we're here is the SPD. If that's okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So if I can go to Councillor Gertsching.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you guys for that presentation. Yeah, look, I look forward to seeing how this consultation pans out. It's late in the day. I mean, sort of 20 odd years, but it's good that you've had it come forward. I know a lot of work's gone into it. Good to have a flexible parking regime. That's very positive. I mean, there is an issue in our ward, St Mary's, and some of the town centres where there's a resident concern where there's an oversupply of car parking obviously in the new car parks and sort of whether the residents are actually using these new car parks or not. So yeah, I mean it would make sense to have development sort of offset with that parking, because what we don't want to do is force developers, and I think the phrase used was suppress development, and what we don't want to do is suppress development and enforce or require developers to have additional parking that's not going to be used, and in the process losing out on our valuable housing, affordable social housing, and not hitting our new build housing targets and getting the bonuses in from the government. So it's all good work, and I look forward to seeing how the review and the consultation pans out. Thank you.
Councillor Blanche?
Absolutely agree with Gertch there. Especially when it comes to affordable housing and sort of the viability tests that go along with it. I mean, the last thing we want to do is have standards which are so prescriptive and lead to an over provision where there is clear evidence that it is over provision, and as a consequence of that, the developer is then able to argue that it's not viable to provide the full or even any affordable housing at the right tenure mixes. That would be really shooting ourselves in the foot if we did that. So we're keenly aware of that and other policies as well, such as those set out within the sustainability SPD and the kind of hierarchy of transport that we really want to be encouraging. It's absolutely right. We've got to get the balance right, and that flexibility is key to that.
Thank you very much. I did note so I've got a couple of questions. First, non-residential parking standards. So under 5.21, there was quite a paragraph talking about some of the borough's largest business parks and amongst the highest levels of car modes share for commuting journeys, including, and that was Vanwall, Norries, Foundation Park. I did mention that these being located within urban areas, but I would say maybe think about things like Foundation Park is not really urban. It like you actually place the residential within actually zone 3, or I think it was 2B or 3, zone 3. So I'm not sure how we can correlate that to being an urban area. The infrastructure to get there, I know that Foundation Park are really good at this. They have their own bus service. So they do go and pick people up to try and encourage people to come in by rail. So I just wondered how that was taken into account, because it seems like what we're saying in here is that the even Maidenhead Town Centre has an above average proportion of its workforce who drive to work, despite being one of the most accessible locations within the borough. How is that then? How have you taken that into account when you've informed on this SPD? Because it seems like the non-residential parking, and these are the biggest locations that we have for business like parks, seem to counteract that and say that we need more parking. So I'm not sure how I understand that we've reduced, or we're doing expectation of a lower parking requirement for non-residential.
So the evidence with regards to how people travel to work came from the census data, but then that's how we use the connectivity tool to lay it on top of that. So I think in some places in the evidence base, it will say that whilst the census data may show one thing, that you have to sort of caveat that with what the connectivity tool is showing, and that's obviously not just the access to public transport, but your access to other forms of connectivity in your strategic network as well, which is where the Foundation Park sort of circumstance will have come in.
So I was just trying to understand, how was that then taken into account when you were landing on the non-residential parking standards around business parks? And because it seems like it's saying we have a high incidence of use of cars, and obviously we're trying to get away from that. So how have we actually leveraged that, and also our environment strategy within our parking SPD? So I wondered if there's if you can encapsulate that for me, how you actually got to where you were, and was this considered within that?
Although it's simplified, we still have within the non-residential standards these two zones. So the sort of edge of town sites for business, such as Foundation Park, and the Maidenhead Office Park, which recently had a planning application through. They sit within they sit within the lower accessibility part of the two zones. So they'll have slightly more rules that are slightly more allow for slightly more parking than the lower in the inner urban ones. But on top of that, again, it comes back to this idea, which comes from the sustainability SPD, of the requirement to have these travel plans, which are secured by planning obligation. So something like the requirement to put on a private shuttle bus from a station, that would be something that comes through evidence presented by the applicant within a travel plan, which would then be secured through Section 106 agreement. So yeah, I think that's all part of it. And it's about this interplay. I mean, like you say, the parking SPD only goes so far, but it's just one of a suite of tools. And I think we mustn't lose sight of some of these previous SPDs that we've adopted, especially the sustainability one.
Thank you very much. I also had a question. It mentioned about the neighbourhood plans, and I know that there are 8 that have been adopted already, but then there are numerous others that are in the works of being drafted or created. So I wanted to understand, would these neighbourhood plans that are still in draft and not yet adopted have to take account of the SPD? Because it was mentioned by you, Ian, that that a neighbourhood plan would, quote unquote, trump the SPD in their parking plan. So my question is, where does it sit with the neighbourhood plans that are still actually in their application stage, and how that then has to take into account the parking SPD? Because I'm just concerned there are so many on here, we could potentially just miss the boat on all of them, and a lot of them won't be taking into account this parking SPD.
So at the moment, we actually only have one neighbourhood plan that's in preparation. That's the Maidenhead neighbourhood plan, and it's at a relatively early stage. Well, it's there's a draft plan, but it's not been examined yet. So it's actually being consulted on at the moment. So that would have limited weight at the moment, that neighbourhood plan, fairly limited weight. And as such, obviously it all depends on timing and when we adopt this SPD compared to when the neighbourhood plan is made. So at the point of a planning application comes in, a case officer has to consider what planning documents there are, what stage they're at, in order to give them different weight. But clearly at the moment, the Maidenhead neighbourhood plan only has limited weight. So if a planning application came in now and this was adopted, then these parking standards would prevail. So yes, I think that's it. But the other neighbourhood plans that have already been made, they are part of the development plan, and as such, those if they have parking standards, they will have greatest weight.
Because I think the point you were making, Gary, was that once these standards potentially become adopted, does that then limit the ability for those plans which are not yet, or the neighbourhood plans which are not yet made, to come up with their own slightly different standards? That was sort of what I think that's kind of.
I was trying to establish at what stage and what impact they would have on the neighbourhood plans that are at various stages, because there are adopted ones of it, but then it said 8 adopted neighbourhood plans, right? That's what it said. Correct me if I'm wrong. And then there were others that were at various points of application and draft. And so I wanted to understand where in the statement that the neighbourhood plan wouldn't have to take into account or it would overshadow the SPD. Where are we in the stage of, with this being implemented in the aim for spring 2026, what stage will those neighbourhood plans need to be at for them not to have to take into account the SPD, or will it have influence on them during their drafting phase?
Yeah. I think it's a good point. What I'd say is, there's only one, as Ian said, which is the Maidenhead neighbourhood plan, which is currently out for public consultation, but then the next stage will be a independent examination. So, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but my understanding is that will, those parking standards will be looked at independently of the SPD, because the SPD itself is not part of the local development plan. It's merely giving guidance to how to interpret some of the BLP policies. So we looked at it independently. Having said that, of course, the evidence base, I've really tried to emphasise the point of how important it is that this is based on the latest available evidence, and all that evidence is contained within some of the one of the appendices. So I think it was vital for me that this was evidence based, because if this is evidence based, the same evidence is there in front of the the independent examiner, I assume, so where they, it won't be these standards themselves, but it might be the evidence which informed these standards would end up informing the examiner's view of those the standards that might come forward in that neighbourhood plan. I think I'll leave it there, because I don't want to, obviously, as I say, it's it's open to consultation at the moment, so don't want to prejudice that in any way. But that's kind of my thinking on that.
Thank you. And I know it's obviously, so if we have mixed developments where it's residential and non-residential in the same development, is the assumption correct then that they have to do separate calculations based on obviously the residential element and therefore how many parking spaces are there, plus obviously the retail element of it on top of that? Then they would have to obviously derive that. And when we're looking at non-residential, there's a class use, and sometimes I'm not sure, like Class E is a very broad and wide use, and a lot of developers don't want to restrict themselves to a very, very narrow statement of Class E. But within your table of standards, if we just literally take two examples, so Class EA is 1 space per 30 square meters, and Class EB is 1 space per 17 square meters. Now, to me, that's quite a significant difference in how many parking spaces we're going to require, even within a flexible approach. Yet, if I read the description of the two classes, one is for the display or retail sale of goods or other other than hot food, and the other one is sale of food and drink. A lot of retail spaces are that flexible that it could be either of those very easily, and I can't see a developer like restricting, saying, oh, I'm only going to offer this many as specifically retail only and non-food, and those that and so that variability, how do you account for that? Because you've got two massively different expectations within a development. Let's say it would have been great, and I think we're going to miss the boat, but the Nicholson Centre, for example, if we take that as a site example, would have a huge variety of different class uses. How do you calculate 30 or 17 spaces? I mean, I would say you'd need 1 space for every 17, because I tell you what, you need people to be able to come in and park at the centre of Maidenhead, because of not because people are residential there, but because you need people from outside of the town centre to be able to come in and make it a viable economic growth within Maidenhead town centre. So to me, I'm just struggling with that correlation of something and still keeping it broad enough to be able for the developers to be able to exploit it. So can you comment on that, please? Because that's one thing that I wanted to pick up on.
Cannot control, and one of those is other permitted development rules. So you can, yes, of course, at the planning application stage, a building will have a particular use that it's being applied for, and these standards would apply to that use. However, yes, there will be certain rights that developers will have to be able to change from one use to another within the permitted development rules. And that is a national scheme that we don't have any control over. So it's clearly something that the government has chosen to apply permitted development rights. But we can only go on the planning use, the application, the use being applied for at the planning application stage. What happens after that is out of our control.
I suppose what I'm saying, I understand that it can change, but when in the actual application itself, when there's a broad use case, we have two different, and I use just that one simple example of retail and food, can quite easily coexist, and the developer won't specifically limit. It's just an open space that somebody could come and utilize. Yet you have 17 square, a parking space for 17 square meters and one for 30. So it's the expectation that we're going to apply the harsher standard because the developer has an open use case.
Can't account for every single circumstance that could possibly happen on any scheme. So there has to be a slight kind of simplification, if you like, in terms of these parking standards. It would be impossible to cover every circumstance. So, I mean, at the planning application stage, that's one of the issues that the planning case officer would have to consider. Which standards would apply? Is it the EA? Is it the EB? You can't account for every single possibility, I would have thought.
Okay, so this is where I can see we're seeing the flexibility in the application and the subjectivity, and that also matters for panel members when they're judging a planning application as well, that they also can apply this flexible thought process around the rationale behind how much they expect the number of car parking spaces to be accommodated. Okay, I appreciate that. I'm just looking at time, but I don't have anyone else on the list. So I think we can end the item there and move on. So thank you very much for your time and allowing us to raise these questions with you. Councillor Bamanj.
Are there any recommendations you want to take forward? Obviously, I'm keenly aware that you have.
I was about to summarise on that.
Oh, sorry, I thought you were moving on to the next item.
No, just before I close off, I was going to summarise it. When listening to everything that's going on, I haven't picked up on any specific action item that we need for you to take before, along with the SPD. There are some considerations that in its application, which we've talked about, but it doesn't seem like that is informing the actual construct or the content of the SPD. And so on that basis, we're not going to send you away with specific actions that you need to change it, but there are considerations that on its application when it actually becomes enforceable. I appreciate that it's going to go into public consultation anyway, and so I really encourage anybody out there who has other opinions to leverage that public consultation, and I appreciate you've actually done it for 6 weeks rather than the minimum 4 weeks. We've always been challenged on whether we do enough consultation for the public and we allow them enough of a voice. And this is a clear indication that we're giving them not the minimum, but as much as we can. So I appreciate that you've done that for the public. Thank you very much. So thank you for your attendance. Thanks for your time. Okay, thank you. We'll wrap that one up and move on to the next agenda item, which is our final agenda item, which is our work programme that we're going to talk about. We've already noted about the licensing item that was noted from earlier on, so I don't think we need to cover that again. Councillors? Is that okay? We've already noted about the licensing item, so that has been put down already for this. And then we have what was presented to me just before the meeting is a potential scoping and planning document that's been pulled together by Councillor Gert Singh. So if I could give you 5 minutes so you can talk about this for us, and then we can then consider this as well. Is that sufficient for you to be able to summarise this for us?
I will try. I thought I would have 10 minutes, but I'll try.
I'll give you 10 minutes, the same as an officer.
I'll try not to take up all 10 minutes.
I'm just conscious of the time that we
No,
have
that's
left.
fine. That's fine. Thank you. Yeah, look, so the situation is, this is all around Vickers Way car park. I carried out an audit of the car park recently, and following the concerns raised by residents and advice from officers that it's only been used at about 5% capacity. What I found was very worrying. The scaffolding was still up there for well over a year. Barriers underneath for safety, which should have been closed off, were left open, and the doors were left ajar. There was also a further door which had its electronic arm damaged, restricting access for accessible and disabled people. And people were able to park without paying. The security barrier was left open. And this car park is having severe impact and issue on residents. There are also lighting failures, which is making it unsafe for commuters and pedestrians. I've also been informed by residents that late night gatherings and car alarms are causing a constant nuisance for residents living nearby. The layout and the barriers are damaging vehicles, especially larger vehicles that go up and down the ramp. And due to the low occupancy, this is having a serious cost impact on the finances of the borough. My understanding is it's costing around £70,000 a month, plus the additional interest on the £14 million that was borrowed to build a car park. There was a spalling incident of spalling concrete, which was falling from the structure and the face of the car park, which my understanding is allowed the council to instruct contractors to put the scaffolding up and repair it. I've been trying for over a year to find out more information on this. I haven't been able to get much information out of councillors or officers. Now, this is having demonstrable impact on my ward in St Mary's, the town centre and around, and also it's impacting the finances of the borough very seriously. I've carried out crude calculations of my own, and to me it seems it's costing at the borough £1.2 million in the region of per year. So I've provided everyone in all the panel members with a scoping document completed, and also provided that to the scrutiny officer at the beginning of the meeting. That scoping document is a call for action from the scrutiny panel to review this as a matter of urgency and call an urgent meeting within the next month due to the impact. What I've asked for is that the original contractors, Buckingham, are contacted and brought before this committee. Wellesley, the subsequent contractors, are brought before this committee. PTG, the scaffolding firm, is brought before this committee. The scaffolding company, the reason why is because obviously scaffolding has been up for obviously 18 months, and there's a cost. And at the moment, I've not been able to ascertain who's paying for that scaffolding. Council surveyors, I'd also like in front of this committee, and independent surveyors who have carried out assessment. My understanding is surveyors are not willing to sign off the works, which are...
Sorry, Councillor Singh, I don't think you should make judgment on on what's happened unless these people are actually before us, and yes, we should be asking them the question, not saying what has happened and their opinion. So if we can keep it to what we get, the questions that we and the type of view, rather than actually giving some sort of judgment here and now, I think that we're verging towards that. So I just, please, can we just keep within the scoping document?
This is obviously the reason for the urgent action, Chair. So there are serious concerns regarding the construction of this development. So that's why I'm using the my powers as a scrutiny member to call this meeting within the next month. I provided everyone with a copy of the document. I'm happy to have conversations with officers as well, if need be, if we can have a look at the document. But I'd like it I'd like it registered that this meeting is called within the next month. If obviously the council panel members are supportive, and yourself, Chairman.
Okay, we would have to have a vote on whether we're actually going to bring this on the timing of it and actually raising a urgent and extraordinary scrutiny meeting, which I will pose to the panel members. Sorry, just if you could just let me finish what I was about to say, and then I'll come to you. Thank you. Which we will discuss briefly if needed. If any of the panel members have any questions about it that they wish to ask, and then I propose that we actually vote on whether it will be brought before us as a extraordinary meeting. And I think that is a fair way to approach this. And then we will then also decide on the timing of it, because there's a lot being asked of people here, and just to call it in within a certain amount of time we want to be able to make sure this is a productive meeting if it was to occur, and that there is time to gather the information and the people that we need before us. If I can just give us one thought also is we won't be pulling in all of those contractors that you've mentioned. What we will be doing is we will be actually, if we do conduct this meeting, that information will have to be pulled from the contractors by the respective officers that we call before here. And they should ask the question rather than actually pulling out an outside company into the scrutiny. The scrutiny is the overview and scrutiny of the council and the delivery of the council in this regard. So yes, we have done it, for example, with Thames Water. But in this particular scenario, my firm belief is that this can be represented by questions to the officers within our scoping document and the expectation that they need to represent the data. So that is my opinion on that part of the request and the scope. So I'm happy to open it to other panel members to ask questions. Yeah. Oh, sorry. I'm just going to pass over to Mark first of all to say one thing.
Yeah, just to add to what the chair said already. I haven't actually read the scoping document yet. I've only was handed it at the start of the meeting, so I need to go away, have a read of the scoping document, meet with Andrew and other senior officers to understand what we can look at as a scrutiny panel. We need to obviously understand if it's something relevant to the scrutiny panel, or something we can actually have an impact in discussing and outcomes out of this review that you want, Councillor Singh. So I'll go away and discuss that with officers and see what we can do. But I just wanted to sort of give that advice to the panel that we can sort of sit here and say we'll have an additional meeting, but if it's not something actually relevant to the panel and something we can really look at, then we're sort of almost jumping ahead of ourselves here. So I'll read the scoping document, I'll discuss it with senior officers, and I think we can then go from there in terms of the timing and when we can look at potentially this, if it's something relevant for the scrutiny panel to look at.
So, Councillor Singh?
Order, Chair. So I just wanted to ask the scrutiny officer, can you just explain, is my call for action, is it a valid document?
I haven't read the document. You've only handed it to me at the very start of the meeting, so I'll have to read it and then I'll be able to confirm to you whether it is valid or not. I can't comment on that right now.
So, Councillor Singh, I've said as chair that I'm willing to accept this as a scoping document. Okay, and I'm willing to take it on board as a part of the work programme. Okay.
Thank you.
I can read into there very quickly that there are things that would fit within what I feel is within place. But what I'm saying is that we will decide here if we feel that there's with the need by vote, and if the other panel members feel that we will do this via a meeting at the place. It may be that you will get quicker action if this is taken before, say, for example, a cabinet or officer. But if this is scrutiny, the overview and scrutiny is to look at things such as the maintenance program or the contract with the contractors, whether there's safety or compliance and what that looks like going forward. We can look at all of that as a scrutiny on the approach to its use and its ongoing maintenance as well. But if you have a significant urgent safety concern, then I think that the panel is not the place for that. There are other avenues that will get you a quick, sooner response. So that is something to consider. Councillor Kashmir Singh.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with what you said earlier. 1 month would be too soon. So if we can pass it on to the officers and perhaps Cabinet to deal with this, and we can get a response, say, within 3 months. And the other issues that Councillor Glitch said perhaps can be dealt with at the next ONS. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Also, can I go to Councillor Taylor and then after that, Councillor Majid?
I think Councillor Majid had his hand up before me, actually.
So sorry, I didn't see whose hand
It's
up.
okay, Councillor Taylor, I'll let you go first. It's okay.
Councillor Majid, to you and then to Councillor Taylor. I'll do it that way around.
Yeah. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Gertch, for the Councillor Singh for the document. I fully support it. There are some serious concerns there about the safety and also finances, which the current administration are always looking for openings to how we can actually do savings. This is costing us 1.2 million, I believe it was, per year.
Sorry, I think that's unsubstantiated. That's just an assessment done by that councillor. We can't support that. We would need further evidence that that is the case. So can we not keep perpetuating that? Thank you very much. That was just a statement made by that particular councillor. Thank you.
Okay, so I do support the document, but I would also like, I support the document and I also like maybe 3 days, because obviously we've all been handed this document at the beginning of the meeting, so we can actually scrutinise the document and possibly add anything else which we believe that should be scrutinised as well. And I do believe this should be scrutinised, and I also believe at this moment in time that the planning around this Vickers Way car park should be scrutinised as well. And I believe Councillor Helen Taylor, as a resident, was actually involved in that as well. So I would like to include that in there, but I would also like to say about three days roughly for all of us to digest it and maybe make any additions to the document as well, which we would also like to have scrutinised. And I don't think we should wait a month or 3 months, because whatever it's costing the residents, I'm just saying if it is running at a loss, then we owe our residents that we're not actually wasting their money on supporting a white elephant, and this should be brought to scrutiny as soon as possible. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Gert Singh.
Yeah. So if I could just make so obviously planning is gone on this particular thing. What we're actually within our scope is the ongoing maintenance, ongoing costs, and ongoing management of the Vickers Way car park and its use. So I appreciate that the planning has already been done and it's been built. So I think we need to.
So it was just a concern that maybe we can learn some lessons from how that planning was processed. I think you weren't here. I was actually there on the last meeting when this was done, and I believe Helen Taylor, Councillor Taylor, was there as well. But we would like have a look at the way the planning was done, so we do not make the same mistakes again.
Okay.
And I believe we are making the same mistakes, because the planning panels are being handed documents which are 30, 40, 50, 100 pages long on the day of the planning meeting or a couple of days before. So I don't believe we have learned our lesson. I think there is something there to scrutinise and actually learn.
Yeah, I appreciate what you're saying, Councillor Majid, but I think that's a separate matter about the approach to planning, and that would come under something else. What's been provided to us is in the scoping document is around the safety, governance, and the financial viability of the car park. So that's the scope. What we will do is I definitely agree with you that we need time on this, being handed this and trying to make a judgment right now on what we've been given. We will circulate the scoping document to the rest of the panel members. Councillor Singh, I can see that. I already said I was going to go to Councillor Taylor, please. So
Sorry,
yeah,
Mr.
we'll be able to do that. So sorry, you've interrupted my chain of thought there. So we will actually have a delay on making the completing the full scope. We will share this offline outside of this meeting so that the panel members have a chance to input on it. I'm going to go to Councillor Taylor and then, because Councillor Taylor was next. Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. My favourite subject ever, Vickers Way car park. I agree with some of the things in the scoping document, but having said that, a lot of it is past. We can't do anything about it. And I don't think some of the items are really for place ONS. I agree that the maintenance side of things needs to be looked at urgently, and I would suggest health and safety wise also. However, I think a main concern I have of this car park is the use or the non-usage of it. You know, it was built in the wrong place. We all know that. We can't do anything about it. So we're at a crossroads where, you know, we could pull a working group together to try and get better usage of that car park. Now, I have floated the idea, or myself and Councillor Hill, due to the parking pressures in the area, of having residential parking in there overnight. That has been in discussion for several months. We have got some figures on what that would cost. I think it's too high for residents to pay. So I think it would be a good idea for Place ONS to look at how we can utilise that car park in regards to placemaking, in regards to alleviating parking. I do think a lot of people don't use it because it is quite tight. However, if you rejigged the space markings on the floors, it would make it easier to get up the ramps, and then people would probably use it more. So again, that's something that we could look at. I think the scoping document probably just needs tweaking, maybe some things adding, but I absolutely think that Vickers Way car park is something that needs to be looked at urgently, especially with the Nicholson's development looming over us, and Vickers car park being not that far away. And also because of the antisocial behaviour that has become an issue in Vickers Way car park, much like its sister car park, Stafferton Way, across the road. So I'm all for us having a conversation, a working group, a scoping document on this subject. I just think it needs to be tweaked, and I don't think it's not enough time. I think it needs to go to the next meeting at least, or the next scheduled meeting at least, so that we can all agree, you know, what areas we want to look at, what would be the best approach, and, you know, the best way forward, because it needs to be done. But I think we need to be very specific about our goals and to come up with, you know, a decent plan to, you know, that car park's not that old. It opened in what, 22, 23. It's already got bits falling off it. The contractors are now, they're in administration. We can't do anything about that. We need a decent plan going forward to make sure that that car park has a decent lifespan and that it's used, because at the moment it's not used and we're paying for it. So I wholeheartedly, you know, support the subject. I think we just need to tweak it.
Okay, thank you for the comments, Councillor Taylor. I did have Councillor Blundell, but did you want to go back on, because before I go to Councillor Singh?
I'm gonna say similar things to what Helen was saying, actually. That's why I clicked it off. But yeah, broadly in support of the scoping document, agreed that 28 days is too soon. Looking forward to hearing feedback from officers and councillors.
Thank you, Councillor Gurch Singh.
Back to me, Chair.
Well,
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Let's go. We're back to the Constitution. It's very unconstitutional so far, Chairman. I raised the point of order. That should have been heard immediately, but that's fine. We've got a scrutiny officer here who still hasn't confirmed whether the scrutiny document is valid. That's also a breach of the Constitution. Disappointed in that, but anyway, we can deal with that afterwards. Constitutionally, Chair, sorry, do you want?
Asking the
Sure. Constitutionally, this should be heard within 28 days.
Sorry, which part of the Constitution are you quoting?
Okay, do you want me to tell you what part of the Constitution? That is, if you look at the overview and scrutiny panel, part of the Constitution, it is rule A 9.6, and it says, where no panel is scheduled, then the scrutiny officer will call a meeting of the relevant panel within 28 days of receipt of the request. I put the request in today at the beginning of the meeting. We don't have another meeting for 2 months. Councillor Kashmir Singh is happy to wait 3 months, 6 months, waste hundreds of thousands of pounds of taxpayer money, and not willing to call contractors who were legally obliged to this council and this borough. But I'm not willing to do that. I want this meeting within 28 days. And if we can reach an agreement with officers and I'm satisfied and something I can report back to my residents with, I'm happy to do that. But what I'm not willing to do, Chair, is go outside the rules of this Constitution, because they're the rules that bind us.
I'm just studying the Constitution.
Councillor Majid, please place yourself on mute. Thank you.
I was just going through the Constitution, Councillor, to refer to the bit you've mentioned.
Yes.
It seems to be in the call for action part. I'm going to have to read through that whole section because you've taken that one line out, which you've said it has to be within 28 days.
Yes.
There's a whole load of the Constitution above that about call for action, whether it's valid, how the process works. So we're going to have to look at that and see whether it's valid. But like you say, if it is, it goes for that process. It seems like there is something about it being within 28 days, but that's the call for action process rather than the scoping document process, which we're talking about.
Well, the thing is, then we need a legal officer, because otherwise I'll raise another point of order.
I think we've heard your viewpoints on it, and we understand you want to raise this as a call for action, and we'll have a look at it, and we'll be in contact after the meeting to discuss next steps of this.
No,
That's all we can say.
I want to raise another point of order.
Sorry, Councillor Singh. Okay, first of all, just one point of order in the Constitution. It is the chair, okay, that can decide whether on the work programme. Okay, I have overall control over this. Councillor Singh.
Point of order.
Wait, let me finish my sentence, please. Okay, you have put forward a suggestion of something that will go on the work programme. As a chair of this panel, okay, it's not simply for you to decide whether that can go onto the work programme. There are other elements of the Constitution that have to be taken into account. For example, there has to be a vote, and you have to be supported by a number of other councillors for it to get onto the work programme. So that, as a point of order, Councillor Singh, I'd like to remind you of that, please, in that your statement that you will decide whether it comes before, you don't decide whether it comes before the panel. Now, listen to your point of order that you want to raise, please.
I was trying to raise was that you have it within your gift to obviously bring this before a meeting within 28 days. Now, if you're refusing to bring it before the meeting within 28 days, then it's down to the panel to decide, and then we can go to a vote. And if I'm voted down, then that's fine. I've got no issue with that. But this is the Constitution. Look, what used to happen before, the thing is, we used to have a situation, scrutiny has been really, really good so far. What used to happen before, I remember when we were with the Conservatives were ruling the administration, the chairs used to act like the gatekeeper, and they used to stop any scrutiny, any real scrutiny happening. And we haven't had that at the moment, but there is a rule within the Constitution, and I can point at it, where you have the power within your gift to bring this back within 28 days. This is a valid document. we've had a scrutiny officer and been unable to verify that. In fact, there's been several breaches of the Constitution. Have we got a legal officer? We haven't got a legal officer. But what I'm saying is, if you're not willing to bring it before panel, before the committee, let the committee vote on it, and so it comes within 28 days. And if we lose a vote, we lose a vote. But what I don't want to do, I want a standalone meeting for this particular item. I don't want to kick it into the long grass and come back 18 months time. Councillor Kashmir Singh might be happy with another £2 million racked on the debt. I'm not saying you are, but the thing is, I wouldn't be able to live with my conscience, and I wouldn't be able to go back to the residents if I haven't tried my best at scrutiny this evening. We have to try. We all have to. We have to try our best. So that's all I'm trying to get at.
Yeah, and Councillor Singh, I've heard, and you've put forward this document. We've received this document literally just at the beginning of the meeting. We've been dealing with other matters on the agenda, and then we've come to this. Nobody has said that this is going to be kicked into the long grass, as you put it, or in 18 months' time. We have heard suggestions of 1 to 3 months to make sure that there is adequate detail and adequate time for response.
That's not constitutional.
Councillor Singh, I can remove you from the panel if I have to, but please stop interrupting me, because this is now the 3rd or 4th time you've... Okay, Councillor Singh, I will, one more chance, please. Let me finish speaking and stop interrupt. Yeah, and I will come to it, but I am currently speaking and you keep interrupting me. Literally, I haven't even said one sentence yet, and then you've interrupted again, okay? I have said that this, we would be looking at this, and then also other panel members have also reiterated that they wish to have more time to look at this for them to be able to then make the best opportunity of our scrutiny. That's what we've always done. That's the aim and the vision of this, is that we have a robust and clear scrutiny and opportunity, and we make the most of it. Okay, I haven't said at all that this wouldn't come back to us, and also that it would be 18 months time. Okay, so what I'm saying to you is we can accept this as part of the suggestion for the work programme, as we have done for other people that have done scoping documents. And then we need to, and we've said that offline, outside of this meeting, not right now, because we will run out of time, we will put this to all the panel members so they have a chance to look at it and to have an opportunity to put forward suggestions around it, around the scope. And I think that that is a fair approach to the way that this has been presented. Okay, and we will look at the call for action, which I noted the title of the review is a councillor call for action. We will look at that and see if we can bring it back before us within 28 days. So what is your point of order?
Look, if you don't want this before the committee and panel's not able to vote on it, then I'll take this up with the monitoring officer. This is clearly in breach of the council's constitution, A9.6. Right, this you've had the document. It's a valid document. It says where no panel is scheduled for scrutiny officer will call a meeting of the relevant panel within 28 days receipt of this request. And you're not willing to raise to add this to the agenda, and I'll just take it up with the monitoring officer, and you're not allowing the panel to vote on it.
Okay, so Councillor Singh, I have said that it will be put on the agenda under the work programme. I have not said it won't be. I have said it is, and therefore we will consider it under the Constitution and under the as you've put it, the call for action.
You don't have the power to do that, Chairman.
Okay. I think you can now leave the panel. Thank you very much. Please leave the panel.
Thank you.
Okay, within my right on the Constitution, I can ask you to leave. So please leave the panel. Thank you.
I'll be taking up with the monitoring officer.
Just wanted to clarify, Chair, there's a whole section for the call for action. If this is deemed to be under call for action, there's requirements about what that can be, whether that's acceptable. And
please leave. I have asked you to leave, Councillor Singh.
That will be
under
done
my
after
right
the
as
meeting.
a chair.
That will be done after the meeting. We will consider the document, see if it falls under the call for action. And if it does, then Councillor Singh's right in terms of the 28 days, and that can be, but there is a number of other points in the Constitution which we need to read through, make sure the document abides by before we can look at it in that way. If it doesn't fall under the call for action,
then it'll be treated as a
it'll be
normal.
treated as a normal scoping document. So we'll have a look after the meeting and then we'll be in contact with councillors.
So there's no need for a vote. I heard from majority of councillors that they feel that this is a subject that we should be talking about under place panel. I've considered that, and I have acknowledged on a couple of occasions that this will be something that we were going to deal with. And we will look at the scoping document separate from that. We'll decide whether it meets the criteria of a call for action. If it is, then obviously I can allow for it to come within the 28 days, and we will work on an appropriate time frame for that. If it doesn't, then I'll consider it as a normal agenda item under the work programme, and we will bring it back before the panel by the next meeting. And that next meeting is within the next 3 months, I believe. And I think that's fair and appropriate and reasonable in this scenario. And hopefully the panel agree, and that's where we're going to go forward with this. So I apologise for that. That is the end of the, I'm going to call the end to the meeting. Sorry, Councillor Majid.
I've had my hand up for about 10 minutes.
Councillor Majid, is there something additional that you need to add that's going to change the conclusion?
Yes, there is. Yeah, so thank you for the call for action within the 28 days. And that's at your discretion. But I'd also like the panel to vote that we would also like to have it within 28 days, even if it's not a call for action, if there is any constitutional way that we can actually do that.
So
we would still like a meeting within 28 days, if possible, to discuss this. But can we have a vote on that?
I think we've understood the message, Councillor Majid. I think we need to go away and discuss this with officers, because if we kind of sit here, we could sit here now and have a vote and say we want this within 28 days. If it's deemed that it's not something that Scrutiny can look at, it's not the appropriate way to deal with this issue. If there's time that officers need to develop a report to bring before us, if it is accepted, then there's no point in us having that vote now and having that 28-day timescale. I think, my advice would be that we sort of left it, as the chair summarised just now, we take it away, we discuss with officers after the meeting, and then we see whether it's something that we need to take in the call for action timeframes, or whether it's something that we'll bring through as part of the normal scoping document process.
And that is within the constitution of acting as chair, is that I can make that decision. The call for action, it will be within 28 days. I've stated that on a couple of occasions now tonight. That will be done if it fits within the criteria of a call for action. If it's not, then we will discuss whether as panel members, we and the officers will have the time and the commitment to be able to do this, and that it needs to be done as an additional meeting prior to the next one. But we will not make a decision here and now today. Okay, I think that's fair. We will take it away, and we will communicate with you, with the whole panel outside of this meeting, and as appropriate. Appreciate your time. Thank you very much. Sorry to keep you so late. I just wanted to close it off. So that is the close of the meeting. Thank you.